We're going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. Are we good online? Sorry, Eric. Okay. So we'll start with our flag salute. Okay, we have all 5 board members present this evening, and we'll move on to our appointment of the interim superintendent. We, as a board, we have selected Dwayne Yucca as our interim superintendent.
Interim superintendent, subject to the negotiation of his contract.
Second.
Okay, so we will move on to reviewing.
No, you got to vote.
Oh,
To vote.
even though we haven't done, okay. So all in favor of Dwayne Yucca moving into our interim superintendent position, say aye. Aye. Okay, looks like unanimous vote for Dwayne Yucca. So we have the contract within the packet to review.
Madam Chairman, I move to offer Dwayne Yucca the contract that is provided in our packet.
It's in a different order, Jennifer. If you're looking for it to approve.
I'll second.
Yeah, but yeah. Okay. Do you have any review, Cheyenne? Okay, so we'll take a vote to approve the contract within the packet. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. So we'll move on to agenda addition, deletions, or revision to approve the agenda.
Madam Chairman, I would like to propose as part of the agenda that, because this is a very long agenda and I'm concerned about the timing of it, that we have a hard adjournment of 10:30 and not later. Hopefully we'll get through everything by then, but I don't want to extend 2 hours like we did last time because I have to fly out tomorrow and I want to go sleep. Bottom line.
Okay, so end time of 10:30. Okay. Any other additions, deletions, revisions?
Madam Chairman, I move to approve the agenda with a hard stop of 10:30.
Any second?
Second.
Okay. So all those to vote on the agenda with the added 10:30 hard end time, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so we'll move on to special acknowledgements. Leland Bliss, are you here? There you are. Hi, Leland.
Facility staff that are here tonight, why don't you guys all come up here so we can have you introduce yourself to the board. So, a lot of things that you don't know about the facility staff. They all work year-round. They're what we call 260-day employees. Why don't you guys all kind of line up over here on this side, right here? Yeah, you guys can all just line up right there too, right behind them. Face the board. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so why don't we go ahead and have you guys just go ahead and introduce yourselves.
Bill Ryan, building engineer at the high school.
Go ahead, Matt.
Matt Fischler, pioneer. Robert Goodat, locksmith, maintenance.
Gary Stefanik, maintenance.
Kevin
All right. So, uh, a lot of things happen in the summer that most people don't really realize happens in schools. These people have 2 months to get the buildings cleaned and maintained, preventive maintenance done, and they do that all while they still have to take vacations. We're short 5 custodians right now too that are out. So we're going to start the year short-handed. We'll be working with some subs to fill in. But just to give you an idea what the custodians do, they start at the top of a room and clean the lights, the walls, they inspect the furniture for safety, they clean the furniture, and then when all that's done, they go in, they wax the floors, and then they put the furniture back in the room and set it up so it's ready for school to go. They also do things like change the filters in the HVAC systems. They change belts. They do a lot of the lubrication on those units. It gets really hot in the attic spaces, but they all work really hard to get that done. The maintenance guys, so you might have noticed some of the guys actually said what they do. We all have a trade. So we have guys that are specialized. So Brad's an electrician, for instance, so he does our electrical stuff, but now he's also been learning some of the stuff that goes into the control systems in the buildings. Pat works in grounds. Robert's our locksmith, but he also does a lot of work with the boilers. He does boiler tear downs and all that. He's got them all tore down so the state can actually inspect those. Dave does grounds. He also fills in and does work orders for just general maintenance stuff when he's not mowing lawns or fixing irrigation. Gary Stefanik is a master carpenter. He can build anything. And we do a ton of that work in-house. We don't ship a lot of this stuff out. I don't have Mark here, but Don Hammond is one of our HVAC guys. And those guys will go in and change things like big coils out in our units in the summer when they're leaking, or replace big chunks of pipe when we have leaks and valves and whatnot. So I just want to let them all know how much I appreciate them. So I have a really good team. So I appreciate them all.
Thank you. Yeah.
Leland,
Yes.
somebody just came in.
Oh,
Yeah.
Apollonio. Apollonio's our building engineer over at Crooked River.
Thank you.
Yep. And this isn't everyone, but I thank the ones that showed up. Thank you for showing up tonight. Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Rob Bonner.
So we're going to honor. Thank you. We're going to honor one of our athletes who couldn't make it tonight, but his mom's showing up. So we're going to start with a short video from Dr. Hoff.
Prineville has a national champion cowboy. Crook County High School student Shane Scott won the Saddle Bronc title at the National High School Rodeo Finals in Wyoming last weekend. On top of the national championship, Scott was also second in the all-around and 7th in bull riding. Brody Dent of Bend finished for a tie in 10th place in bareback riding. Adrian Steffen of Sisters competed in several events. And Cash Montgomery of Lapine finished 90th in steer wrestling. Congrats to all of you students who competed. Noah Chast, News Channel 21. Prineville has a national...
So I'll be a little redundant. I'm going to paraphrase what you just heard, but Shane Scott went to Wyoming for the National High School Finals. He placed 7th in the country in bull riding, which is impressive on its own. Placed 2nd in the all-around, and then he was your 2023 National High School Champion in the Saddle Bronc. So anybody who knows the type of time and commitment that it takes for anyone to travel across the country with animals in any regard, that type of commitment is unbelievable year-round, and so we're commending him today. He could not be here, so his mother Courtney came to sit in his stead, but I told her that you might have some questions for her. She wasn't real thrilled with speaking, but we're going to pull that out of her still. Do you have any questions about Shane to Courtney or I?
So my understanding is he's first in the world too, isn't he? Or what did he just win that was like Canada, Mexico, Australia?
So basically, that is the National High School Rodeo Association.
Okay,
They have opened it up. It's titled the National High School Rodeo Association, but they've opened it up and qualified it as the world
yeah,
because they've included Australia, they've included Canada now, they've got Mexico. We've got contestants from basically everywhere. So on his saddle that he won, on any of the saddles that anybody won, they called it the world champion. So
okay,
you have your world champion steer wrestler, your world champion bull rider, your world champion saddle bronc rider, such was Shane. So, and this is the first year that I know we've had, Shane's qualified all 3 years so far since he was a freshman. He's now going in to be a senior. He has qualified, and as I recall, it's always said national.
okay,
So I think this was the first year that
Okay.
they did
Saying
switch it over to saying world.
okay.
So, and I just want to qualify as well, and you don't know this. I'm Shane Scott's stepmom.
Oh.
His mom's also not available to be here tonight, so I just want to make sure.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Oh.
So,
Well, we appreciate you coming. Our family got a chance to watch him ride this, I think it was the past weekend before last at Deschutes and the duel that,
oh, the duel in the desert on Sunday.
Yeah.
That was
I
fun.
didn't know he rode multiple animals. We only knew him in saddle broncs, so it was cool to watch him ride a bull too.
Yeah, he actually also team ropes, and he used to do some calf roping, and then he also qualified for nationals in the cutting this year. He actually started doing cutting and ran cow horse just last fall, so kind of picked up those extra events and
Yeah,
decided he was just gonna go for it. So,
that's awesome.
yeah.
World champion.
His next goal, really, he is also doing amateur rodeo this summer. So last year he qualified for the Northwest Professional Rodeo Association finals. He actually ended up winning the finals in the bull riding. So he's looking to go back to that. This year he would like to pick up the saddle bronc. He can start pro rodeoing when he turns 18, so that would be through the PRCA. So he's got that on his checklist. So yeah, he would love to make it back to National High School Rodeos this next year as a senior, and then just go from there.
Be seeing him in Vegas one day. Yeah, that's the goal.
I'm
right?
yeah,
I
I'm
bet.
crossing my fingers.
Yeah,
So yeah, he's pretty excited. He's kind of chomping at the bit till he can start pro rodeoing. So yeah, yeah, thank you.
Well, we're very proud of him, and please give him this plaque
Yeah,
and our appreciation.
thank
you so much.
Did you have a question?
No, I was just going to make a comment of, I'm on the Roundup board.
Yeah.
And I know Oregon is just on the cusp of, there's some
We've got some great athletes.
really, really
Oh,
high quality
amazing.
athletes coming out of the state of Oregon.
Yeah.
And just even coming out of Central Oregon, let alone Cook County, it's some really high quality athletes that are
Yeah.
in that sport that it's really cool to see hometown.
Yes, it is.
It's we're growing some really amazing athletes.
Yes, we are.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Okay, item number 2, our public comment follow-up. So this is from our July 5th board meeting. We had 3 public comments at that meeting, and one was from Callista Songstad, and we'll be covering that policy later in this meeting. I'm not sure if you're here. And the next one was from Felicia York, which is another policy, BDDH, which we will also be following up on this evening. And the other issue brought to our attention was about having the videos recorded again and put on the website. And our tech department has already done so. If you go to our district website, there's a school board tab, and within that tab there is another one under it that's titled YouTube channel. So you no longer have to go search or try to find our meetings. There's an actual link to them on the district website if you want to follow up or rewatch any of our meetings. So we'll move on to public comment. I have a couple up here. One is Holly Haynes. Oh, that's okay.
Good evening. Over the last year, I've brought to the former board's attention a number of issues that are alarming, and tonight I have some additional issues of concern. To recap, we appear to have district social media accounts following strippers, alcohol trucks, and marijuana sites on Instagram, teachers violating state law in their grading practices, administrators violating students' due process rights and disciplinary actions, teachers not getting their contractually required lunch breaks, which put principals' licenses in jeopardy. We have parent-student handbooks that contain disciplinary policies that are not supported by state law because apparently we thought we were smarter than the lawyers who drafted the handbooks. We have one nonprofit getting free rent from the district, but another nonprofit paying for rent. We have disciplinary actions not being reported to ODE as required, and that creates potential funding implications. We have an irregularity intended to influence collective bargaining. We had the former board refusing to perform necessary audits in the areas of grading and discipline when issues were raised. We have teachers bullying students, parents pulling their kids from the district over SPED problems, including apparently misplacing a nonverbal student. We have bad test scores, and we did have those before COVID. We have FERPA violations all over the place. We have administrators admitting that they did not follow district policy regarding certain questionable books. And we seem to be preoccupied with marketing the district, which is a public entity, so that's just weird. We have an alleged culture of restorative practices concerning discipline, but we seem to be ramping up staffing for after-school suspension tutors, and we're routinely at the top of the list for disciplinary action in the state. We have a critical need for counselors at the middle school, but no counselors. We had to hire a mentor teacher to keep an eye on new hires who are doing bad things. We have parents who are hiring lawyers because the district refuses to do the right thing. We have parents requesting information that directly impacts their specific children, and those requests are being denied. We appear to have inadequate staffing in the SPED department to meet requirements in Senate Bill 819. That's not even been addressed at all by the district, and school starts in a few weeks. We have open jobs not even being advertised and job titles being changed after someone is hired. And finally, we have questionable timelines for when certain newly hired administrators were granted their restricted administrator licenses. One of those administrator licenses appears to have been granted months after that person was hired, which would violate TSPC rules. Another administrator's license appears to be granted before the position was even open, and without the position being advertised, it appears the successor was chosen behind closed doors without allowing anyone else to apply. So why is that? We seem to be hiring people who don't know the rules, don't want to comply with the rules, or simply think the rules don't apply to them, all of which is scary, and this seems to be from the top down. So are these people not qualified? Are we just doing a shoddy job at educating new employees and re-educating existing employees on a regular basis about policies, laws, and just general expectations as public employees? During the recent work session, some participants were clearly stonewalling the new board members, particularly concerning the need to have a detailed organizational chart with who's working here and where, and whether their qualifications meet the job description. So without a detailed organizational chart, I don't know how anyone can effectively manage an organization of thousands of students, hundreds of employees, distant schools, increasing enrollment, and significant turnover. If we are hiring people who are never qualified to do the job they were hired to do, why did we hire them? Is it like the free rent thing? Is it who you know? Were the job titles changed to reflect candidate qualifications? Why are we not publicly advertising certain jobs as the contracts and policies say that we should? Were significant administrative staffing changes made just prior to the former superintendent leaving, and why? So as I mentioned to a former board member, the district should not underestimate the community's willingness to dive in and help, but we cannot tolerate corruption and lawlessness, because it just doesn't work that way. Thank you.
Thank you, Holly.
Holly, thank you for coming up to speak.
Next, we have Jill Rogers.
Good evening. My name is Jill Rogers. I'm a parent of 2 kids here in the Crook County School District. They've been on this school district for 10 years. And I did attend the work session meeting on July 31st, and I thought after hearing some of the comments there, I would share my experience as a parent. Parents actually have a lot of discretion in the school district with their children's education. We have access to the library. We have access to the teachers' libraries in the classroom. I have gone to every single open house, every single parent-teacher conference for my kids, and there's lots of time to browse the teacher's classroom, look at the book titles, look at the teaching materials there. Also, we receive a lot of opt-out forms for movies being shown in the classroom, for field trips, for curriculum, and sometimes I've actually utilized those opt-out forms. So that's been a wonderful thing to have. Also, our high school students and middle school students do have choices on their electives. There is a period of time after you find out your student's schedule that you can go meet with a school counselor and talk about things you would rather have other than what has been given. And I actually have utilized that for my student. I have 1 student in high school, 1 student in elementary school. And also, being here 10 years in the school district, we have also utilized Kids Club. It is vital to this community for working parents. I can't imagine what parents would do if there was no Kids Club. And I can attest that since Kids Club has been at Barnesview Elementary School, that gym has been available for usage by other entities, the Crook County High School dance team and Rimrock volleyball team. So I know that that has been something that's been available for other entities to utilize. And final notes, we cannot turn drama, music, choir into clubs. Those entities are critical to a well-rounded education, and those teachers that teach those content areas are phenomenal, and it would be a tragic loss to our school system if we lost those teachers. We cannot take funding from other students to give to other students. I'm confident that solutions can be found through creative and collaborative processes to find the funding we need for their areas. And also, I am against having board members in the classrooms, monitoring or what have you. I think if there's information they need about those classrooms, they can rely on their administrators and their teachers for input. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, now we have Jamie Whale.
My name is Jamie Whale, and I have, my 2 children have been, their entire career has been in Crook County. I've listened to the last meeting that you guys had. I absolutely 100% implore you not to delete or move to a club the performing arts. Classes for the performing arts, band, choir, and drama are essential to kids, their growth, to their identity, to their expression, and it can't be taken away. I'll give you an example. The class year 21-22, band was as a 0 period. When it started, they had over 30 kids. By the end of that year, they were down to 7. And that was as it was a 0 period. It was an available class, but it was outside of regular time. If you take it to a club status, we will not have people in, we will not have a pep band, we will not have a concert band, we won't have anybody for concert, for school, for football, basketball. Choir and drama is where kids go to, music is where they learn to express themselves, they learn to fit in, they're able to fit in. If you take that away from them, they won't stand a chance. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to section 4. Oh, yes, Scott.
If I can make a statement real quickly. There's been buildup online about moving performing arts classes to a club. Was testimony tonight on that. As far as I know, there is no formal proposal on the table to do that. There was a question that was asked at the work session about the feasibility. It's just a question at that point. Could this happen? And it was made by a board member, not the entire board. And so there would be a lot of process steps that would have to happen before that would ever happen, and none of those are in place at this time. Could it happen in the process? I suppose, but it's not contemplated at the moment. And I can tell you, I personally believe that arts should be embedded, arts and music, as a firm part of the curriculum from elementary all the way up through high school. I think they're very valuable to students for a number of reasons, both academically and socially. So I couldn't support that. But as far as I know, I don't need to oppose it because it doesn't exist at this point. So.
Thanks, Scott. So for section 4, I do have a few questions within section 4, so I don't know if I pull those out or.
Yeah, you can pull out individual items to ask questions, or you can, and then vote on the ones you haven't pulled out. Or you can ask those questions and then keep them in and vote on the entire consent agenda.
Okay, so I have questions on 4.10 for that resignation of Rex Allison. What are we doing with that position? Because I noticed within his resignation, there's options. Have we decided that, done? Because this is another part of our mental health.
We wouldn't be able to speak specifically to that situation as it's a personnel issue.
Okay.
But Jay, with any vacancy, would post and advertise to fill any vacancy.
Okay. And then the 4.11, I'm assuming dates are wrong on it, but I could be wrong.
What that is doing, as part of the calendar committee, traditionally our back to school in-service week is 4 days and the Friday is a day off, to make sure that staff don't come back at the end of the year just for 1 day on Monday. They've moved that professional development day to the Friday of in-service week. By contract, that is, we have to split half of the in-service week, which is normally 4 days. So this MOU allows us to have that Friday as a full district-directed day. So the union is good with that. It allows teachers more prep time.
Okay, and in the second paragraph, it says this MOU is intended only as a result of the specific circumstances relating to the 23-24 calendar, which resulted in the change of a contract day from June 17th, 24 to September 1st, 23.
Mm-hmm.
Is it 25?
So that would be, no, it'd be the June 24th at the end of this school year would be the.
So June 23rd to September 23rd.
Yep.
So the year is wrong.
Nope, because the end of the school year in June, that would be the year 2024. We're moving it to the Friday of in-service week, which is 2023.
Oh, okay. So you're taking it off the end of.
Taking it off the end of the
Okay,
year,
got it. And
putting
then
it
putting at
on
the beginning.
the Friday of in-service week.
Okay, got it. And then can you go over 4.12?
Yes,
I'm not
4.12
100% sure what
is
we're
our
looking at.
state-required English language learners report. So those are students that are designated needing English language services. And this is an annual report that our ELL coordinator, Mr. Britter, puts together that has the required information that he sends to the state.
Okay, so I guess I don't quite understand the breakdown in our numbers with current, former, and never.
Yep, good question. So current means they are currently receiving English language services. So those are students in the program currently. The state also requires us to track those students once they leave that. Those are former English language learners. So once they test out of the English learning program, they become former, but the state requires us still to track to see how they do. And then the never English language learners, those are students that have never been in the program.
Okay. Okay. So those are the questions I had. I don't know if anyone else has questions.
I just had a correction on 4.1. What is it? 3.4. It's just got Scott and I's names mixed up. It says Scott Holiday and moved, and Scott Cooper second.
So
Minor issue.
We will get that fixed in the minutes, and you can adopt it with the correction. Good catch.
Does anyone else have any?
Madam Chairman, reserving the right to be me and Steve the right to be him, I move to approve the consent agenda.
Did you have something, Cheyenne?
I had a question on 4.6.3 about the Title I reading teacher, making sure that they did have a reading endorsement.
Is that something Jay has to?
That would be a specific personnel issue that we wouldn't be able to discuss, but we can have Jay look into that and make sure they meet all the requirements.
Okay.
And there is, with any employee, HR does a licensure kind of review, so we can put a note to follow up on that.
Okay. All right. Anyone else? Okay. So can we take a vote, or do you
Need a
have to
second
approve
to
it?
my motion.
Okay. Does anyone want to second Scott's motion?
I didn't hear all of what you said, but I'd like to second Scott's motion.
Steve's winging it over here. Okay. So we'll move on to Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda with the modifications given? Aye. Okay. Okay, so 5.0 is superintendent update, which
Yes, so we have a large superintendent update section. I believe all of these are follow-ups from either the July board meeting or the July work session. So I'm going to start by inviting Mr. Huffman and Mr. Hayes to come up to talk about cell phone policies and procedures for heading in the 23-24 school year.
All right, thank you for having us. Perfect. So in the district policy for social media for students, students may be allowed to use and possess personal communication electronic devices on the district property and at school-sponsored activities, provided such devices are not used in any manner that disrupt the learning environment or district-sponsored activities, or violated board policies, administrative regulations, school or classroom rules, and state and federal law. So the big piece there that we go through is the disruption of the learning environment, and that's our main focus. So at CCMS, our basic rules, when students show up at the start of the day, they'll head into breakfast and or the gym, and then when they head to class, they stop off at their lockers, and first thing when they get to their lockers, they all have their individual lockers, and cell phones, hats, bags, everything they need that they don't need for class is left in their locker at the start of the day, and then at the end of the day, they're able to get those items and be on their way. So that's the basic cell phone rules at CCMS. Do you guys have any questions for me in terms of those policy procedures or some details about those?
Did you say that your individual students have their own lockers, or do you have some sharing lockers?
Every student has their own locker. That was an adjustment we made with some of the old, we call them Frankenstein lockers down the gym hallway that we've kind of pieced together and taken parts out of others to make us have enough to so that every student gets a locker. That's been a huge adjustment that we've made here in the last couple years.
What's your compliance with this policy? Do students actually do this?
All of them, no.
No.
I would say there's a few students that have a struggle departing from their phones, excuse me. But I would say overall it's followed pretty well. Sixth graders much better than eighth graders. Eighth graders in the spring's a little different ballgame, but I would say for the most part our staff and our students are pretty on board with this, and talking with like subs that come from out of district and different schools, love the follow through and the expectations at the school.
And what's the consequence for non-compliance?
Non-compliant, and that's something Jake and I had talked about, and I stole a tool from him that we're going to be adding with kind of a electronic device turn-in receipt that when students have their phones, if it's focus period right at the start of the day, some teachers will go put it away, run back to your locker, put it away. Later in the day, if students are on it, then that's sent to the office, and it usually sits on my back counter behind my desk, and at the end of the day, those few students will come up and pick them up.
There was a sixth grade teacher a few years ago that took your phone away and dropped it in his aquarium full of tarantulas. And that actually was very effective for preventing use of the phone. He's not with us anymore, but I kind of liked that approach.
Is that a suggestion for?
It worked. There was 100% compliance in that class.
Do you have them sign anything like a cell phone policy, or do you get pushback from parents at all, or what have you heard? I mean, it sounds like it's something fairly new you're trying to put in. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, so that's in the handbook, and that's something we have focus lessons at the start of the year that are kind of the main talking points that students are in on during that focus time. And then that's something like rules roundup after Thanksgiving break, Christmas break, after spring break, those rules are revisited. And so that's part of the communication piece there. In terms of contracts, we don't have contracts that the students sign based off of the handbooks.
So the high school is a little bit different. As you know, high school students, not all, but most high school students, a lot of their life is centered in their phones. So this is kind of a layout of what ours looks like, and it's 3 steps. And the first one, the teacher handles. Students travel with their phones all throughout, so they don't check it into their locker. Most students at the high school don't have lockers, but students have their phones in class, and then the teacher gets to handle that at first, and they can do a class-wide warning. Or they can warn individual students. Then if it continues to become a problem, then they go on to step 2, and that is they can ask the student to take the phone to the office, where that way nobody touches the phone. Those are very precious for some students, and so then nobody touches the phone. It's turned into the office, and they get the receipt, which you can see there, and they return that back to the teacher. If that happens, then that's all the further it goes, and then they collect that phone at the end of the day. Where we run into some problems at times is, if the student decides not to allow us to take their phone, or says, oh, I got a really big emergency at work, or my mom needs to get a hold of me because I got to pick up the kid. There's all these, everyone's got an extenuating circumstance. And so I think at times, in theory, it's a really good procedure, but in practice, it gets to be difficult, especially with smart kids that can reason very well. And then another one of the things that seems to be a way that students are able to use their phones is when, because we're one-to-one with Chromebooks, and my Chromebook's dead, or I don't have my Chromebook, or there's no loaners left, and then can I access my classes through my cell phone? So those are some of the common ways that students get to use their phones. But this is the procedure that we have in place to intervene with students using their cell phones.
Do you have any policies in place to protect teachers? I know just having high school students, I've had kids come to my home and show me that they've Snapchatted taken videos of their teachers and put filters on them and recorded them. So is there any policy or thing in place for them to not do that to their teachers?
No, just this cell phone procedure that we have in place. I mean, students shouldn't be on their phones, and then it's up to the teacher, which is a heavy lift, but it's up to the teacher to manage their kids in the class. And I think that's what happens is they just get bombarded and they just get tired. So I mean, some things we can do better. I think from the high school, we need to engage with parents more at the beginning of the year, and make sure parents know what the procedures are for us and what the expectations are for us. And so we've started that this year. We have a packet that we sent home through the mail, and then we also included our cell phone procedures in our little email thing that we send home to parents as well. So that's something we're starting with, and then just more communication at the beginning of the year throughout, and then making sure teachers are actually aligned with that.
I know you had mentioned that either you don't have enough lockers or kids don't get lockers. So where are kids intended to put their cell phones away? In their backpacks, or what is your assumption?
In their pocket, in their backpack, yeah, just keep them
Outside.
off their desk, yeah, just concealed so they can do classes. And kids can check out lockers. We probably have enough lockers for everyone to have one, but we've just found that kids at the high school don't access them. We still have them for people to check out, and they're available for people if they want them.
Are they going to be available at back to school, or are you guys going to wait till going in? Because
I
I know
haven't thought
Lily
about that.
wanted a locker, but she had to wait like 2 weeks, and volleyball had already been going, and
Oh,
we
really?
were a month into season before she could even check out a locker. So I don't know if that might.
We can have them, I think it'd be easy to have them available at our Thursday the 31st, if that's early enough.
I don't. I just know it was into the school year, and
Sure.
I know like she had bags that I think Rob stored on his
Yeah.
floor, or Christy stored on the art room floor.
There's some large, I know this isn't about cell phones, but there's some large lockers along the PE hallway where the trophy cases are and stuff. They're larger, and we actually got NJROTC to switch with us. So those are now available for folks like Lily Mae who, have,
Yeah.
a volleyball and a wrestling shoes and 45 things that they have to pack along, and they can throw that in one of the big lockers. Or kids that bring scooters or baseball, like especially baseball season, that's something that's pretty prevalent. The kids that have the bats sticking out of their backpack. So
Yeah.
those big lockers are now available to check out. So we'll do a better job of communicating that to student athletes so
Yeah.
they know.
Jake, have you ever investigated alternative policies for managing cell phone behavior in the classroom?
Well, actually, this one that we came up with actually was used at Redmond High School a few years ago, and then we just felt like it was pretty solid. In theory, it's solid, but in practice, I think it's a little bit harder. But beyond that, no, I haven't looked further.
I mean, the ones that I've seen that seem to be effective address directly the fact that kids are addicted to their phone and literally can't lay it down. And that's to place one of the, I guess in real life it's a shoe sorter, but one of those pieces of paper with a whole
Yeah.
lot of pouches. And telling kids when you walk in the classroom, you put that in your pouch.
Yeah.
And then you're physically separated from it and you can't check it. Or the teacher can still tell you, go get it if it's got to do with an assignment. But that seems, I've seen that in Bend, I've seen that in Elmira, and it seems to be a better approach.
Scott, in a class that I taught, I had a basket up front, and the kids, when they came in, they just put their phone in the basket. And so it was still accessible if there was an emergency or something, but they didn't have the ability to like feel it vibrating in their pocket or take it out. It was something similar, and it worked really well. And at the beginning of the class, they signed a cell phone policy, which was a voluntary policy that, for their learning environment, they were going to check their phone in.
Thanks. Any other questions?
Thank you, Mr. Huffman. Mr. Hayes? The next follow-up that was requested by the board was information on school start times. So I'm going to invite Michelle Williams to join us up here. So the problem that we're looking to address is that about 4 years ago, we shifted to tiered start times. So the elementary drop-off is different, about 50 minutes to an hour different than the middle school, high school drop-off. And what that happens is families with both elementary and middle school or high school students having multiple drop-offs, there's a gap in there. So the question was, what can we do to fill that gap? Can we go back to a non-tiered start time? And that term tiered start time just means two different times where we'll go out, we'll pick up all the elementary students, drop them off at the schools, then the buses go out, pick up all the middle school and high school students and drop them back off at the schools. So we looked into, could we feasibly, what would it take to go back to a tiered start time? Michelle Williams did a lot of research on what that would take, and she can walk through this.
There we go. So if we want to go back to the non-tiered start time, part of the thing that helped us was in 2025, we can no longer use buses that do not meet the 2007 emission standards. So for us, that was quite a few buses. And when we went away from everyone coming in at the same time, we made our replacement plan based on we could double use buses. So in order for us to go back and to everyone comes in at the same time, it would mean increasing our fleet substantially. And we currently have 10 elementary routes and 12 secondary routes. And we do that with 13 buses and 13 drivers. So, and I'm not including, because it doesn't really affect Palview, Paulina Brothers. So we can do that with 13 drivers. However, if we go back to a non-tiered start time, now I've got to transport all of those kids, and it's close to double drivers, double buses. And then on top of that, the other piece that we have is then our special needs kids then are riding all together, or in order to split them out, we need additional special needs buses and drivers. We already are short-staffed in drivers, and that would include, so we would need close to, depending on what our growth is, 16 additional drivers, 9 just to cover routes, which means that wouldn't be any sports transportation. All of that would have to be chartered. And then in addition to that, the driver's hours are reduced. So one of the things that we have had to help keep some of our drivers is that people can now make a wage that they can help support their families. When we were doing 1 route a day, we had drivers driving 2 hours a day, 2.5 hours a day on a split shift. So that means in order to get there less than 3 hours a day, they were coming in twice to accomplish that. And if we go back to that, we will lose drivers. Now they're working 5 to 8 hours a day, which they can help support their families on that. They get their insurance, they get insurance to help their families. The other issue that we really had too is that, and since then we've added Steen's Pillar since we have had a non-tiered start time. And if we do that currently, we transport kids, doesn't matter particularly where they live, they go to whichever grade school they want to. Well, now that's 3 grade schools, a middle school, and a high school. So if your kindergartner gets on the bus at Barnes Butte, they're going to be on the bus for more than an hour to get through all of those schools before that bus even takes off to head for the first stop. And if your stop is at Cascade Way in Alfalfa, your kindergartner is now on the bus for probably 2.5 hours. Just one way, just because of the time it takes us to load kids at each particular school. In addition to that, we would have increased maintenance costs because we're doubling the amount of buses that we're getting. We have to take into account that we did not buy tablets for our new system that was based on having a double, so we would need to buy another set of tablets, another set of radios for buses. Wi-Fi is in all of our buses for students to use to do their homework on sports trips or for those kids that do have longer bus rides. We also would need to, the maintenance cost, we'd have to have another mechanic because the fleet grows by that much. It's too much for 2 mechanics to handle. So we can do it. It's just depends on whether or not we want to take on the cost.
But wait, there's more, because that's a lot of constraints, but in order to solve the problem that we're actually looking for of parents being able to drop their kids off at different times, there are some other ways to do that. Some are very straightforward and easy. For example, we can extend the 6:12 morning drop-off time to 8:05. I've already talked with Mr. Hayes and Mr. Huffman. That's simply flexing some staff's hours so that they can open those doors early, so parents would be able to drop their elementary student off in the morning. Then they'd be able to drop their high school or middle school student off right after that, and they would be supervised and they could work on homework in a safe, warm place. So that's an easy fix that doesn't cost millions of dollars and double our bus fleet. So that is one real simple, straightforward solution that we can implement starting, essentially day one of the school year. On the other end of where we'd have to flex the elementary time, I put that in yellow because it's not as straightforward. So there's currently some options. So we offer after-school clubs during certain dates throughout the school year. So each elementary teachers pitch various clubs, kids sign up. They're usually 6 to 12 weeks, 3 days a week. So that extends the after-school time at the elementary for students to where there wouldn't be a big gap. There's also Kids Club. That is at each school, and that provides also time where if parents were having drop-off issues. In order to expand that, Anna's going to give a presentation later that talks about, we could fund additional opportunities. I think a good next step is to gather information on how many parents and families are actually in this situation. So that way we can gauge, well, do we need to start 10 clubs? Are we really only talking about 5, 10 families total? So I think that would be a good next step. Any questions?
What is our current doors open time at the middle school and the high school?
I know school start times are up there. It's usually, I want to say, half hour. 8:45. Yeah, so it's about half hour before the start of school. So opening them early would cut about 45 minutes that families would be able to drop their student off earlier.
I don't know if you know this or Joel, looking at surrounding areas like Madras, Culver, Bend, do they all have tiered start times? Every school district in Central Oregon does?
Yeah, we were.
Yes.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say yes, and some of them have multiple tiered start times. So Bend even has a separate run for middle school kids as opposed to high school students. So they have 3 tiers.
So historically, how it's been solved in those other regions, we looked into it. For example, in Bend, they partner with Parks and Rec, just like we have Kids Club to fill that gap for parents who need it.
So what ultimately changed 4 years ago? We decided do we pick up more routes? I didn't quite gather that. We don't have the right buses for 2025, or what changed? What was the ultimate change 4 years ago to start the
That we went to a tiered start time?
Yeah.
It was during COVID, and it was to reduce the amount of students on the bus at one time.
Oh, okay.
So Joel, did you look at expanding or starting the drop-off time earlier for elementary? I mean, I see 6:12, but why not? Why aren't we talking K-5?
So 6:12, the elementary is early. So parents drop their elementary student off, and then they'd have to wait 45 minutes before they could drop their middle school or high schooler off. So the elementaries don't need to start earlier. Our middle schools do. And then we have the inverse problem in the afternoon, where our elementaries, we need to extend time on the back end because our secondary schools are going
You just use the elementary schools as the base.
Yeah.
Well, while you're surveying parents, you might find out when they would like to drop their kids in the morning, because I certainly hear that we are pretty strict about when they can come in, and it's too late for a lot of people who need to be at work at 8 o'clock.
Yeah, that's a big thing that was brought to my attention too, is kids, parents are ultimately dropping their kids, but they can't get into buildings until a certain time, and it's like a half hour or so before doors even open.
Yeah.
So we're definitely running into that with parents that need to get to work. So Scott may be right. I'm not sure.
We can add those types of questions to an upcoming family survey.
I think too at the middle school, I don't know, Marcus, maybe you can speak to this. Do the kids, and maybe at the high school too, but they stand outside. So you have a group of kids that stand outside. That seems like a safety hazard as far as like if there was ever a shooting or something. I mean, you have like all these kids gathered in one area. Have there been any concerns with safety issues with that? Do you see, I've driven by and I've seen like tons of kids standing out there. Has that been a concern for parents or for you guys at all?
It has not come up from parents. I have had conversations with Prineville Police Department in terms of the SROs being more visible. And throughout the year, we had a few police officers there supporting before school, and then also with, like Joel mentioned, that we'd be bringing kids in early at that 8:05 time.
Yeah, so this 8:05 time that we're able to do for minimal costs solves that issue. You wouldn't see students waiting outside early. So our next steps are to gather more information from parents and then look at how we can provide more opportunities after school for elementary school students, because that would give parents more time.
Sorry, I have one more question for you. Michelle, I was looking, we have Ms. Lowenbach coming up to speak, and I saw in her job description there was an assist with Tier 2 transportation support. What is that?
I can speak to that. Mr. Smith, when he was in that position, if a bus complaint or issue escalated beyond the transportation department, he would take that on, and I think that just probably got carried over to the next job description.
I think, Cheyenne, that happened a lot because I drove bus a lot during the school year, and so he was extra support for us.
And that was particularly because we wanted to provide efficient and quick feedback when families had an issue, and when Michelle was driving a bus, so that way Stacy miraculously stepped in so that we could get better service to parents when they're having a bus issue.
Are you still driving buses?
The first week, I don't think I am.
Okay.
So.
Mr. Hayes, Ms. Williams, thank you. So I believe I want to say it was in, it had to be April or May. Mr. Cooper gave me a challenge, and he said, how can you ensure that every K-5 student is getting exposure to all the music standards that they're supposed to, and to make sure they have a quality program? Because over the last maybe 5 years, our schools have specialized in the specials, which are like the elective classes they offer, where Steen's Pillar, for example, focuses on arts and technology for the students' elective class. So the challenge is, how can we make sure that students that, where their specials focus on arts and technology, meet all the music standards? So what we did over the spring is I met with each of the elementary principals. These are the kindergartners' music standards, for example. So think of kindergartners, about 5-6-year-olds. So one of their standards, for example, this is MU4PR1K, is with guidance, they can demonstrate and state their personal interest in varied musical selection. So what we did is we met with each principal of each elementary school and said, hey, what can we put together to make sure those students are meeting the standards? What we've done is we've designated a third of the standards for each trimester. And what's going to happen particularly, so at Barnes Butte, they have a full-time music special. So they cover those throughout the year. At Brothers and Paulina, they have instructional blocks that include music throughout the year as well, and they do performances. You'll see when you go to Brothers, they usually sing to you, so you'll get a firsthand information on that. So what we had defined is working with Kimberly as well as Jim Bates, which is now Brian Kissel, how can we design a program to make sure that students at Steenspiller as well as Crooked River are exposed to the music standards for their grade level. So what we did is we designated particular music standards and then working with those teachers. So for example, here at Steenspiller, Janelle Deeden is the arts teacher. And if you know Janelle Deeden, I believe she plays the trumpet. But so she has the standards that she will need to hit, and they will do them as either in like a boot camp, as like each trimester they'll do a 2-week music boot camp, or they'll designate certain days each week that students come to those specials and they will target those standards. So our next steps on this are to assemble our elementary music instructors to support, gather resources if they all need to buy, I don't know, flutes, making sure that the teachers have the resources so they can embed those standards into their specials. So at Steenspiller, it'll be embedded in the arts special that students get, and then at Crooked River, it'll be embedded in they call it the STEAM special, which is science, technology, engineering, arts, and music, as well as Crooked River also does something in their PE class called rhythm and music to a certain degree that they cover some of those standards as well. So we've got our standards map. We need to assemble the elementary teachers and kind of flesh out exactly what that looks like. But this way we can guarantee that all K-5 students have a base level exposure to the music standards and experiences in that as well.
Do we only have standards for K through 5?
No, there's standards K-12. It gets a lot more specialized if you think, just as you go through from middle school to high school, students get to select their electives more so than they do in elementary. So that's where they would get those standards. And it's kind of based on interest, where if a student, in elementary school or middle school learns to love music, then they'll probably stay with, band or choir. So it differentiates, just like it does with welding or culinary arts, where students get to kind of specialize a little bit, which is great because everyone has different interests.
If you take music in middle school, high school, then the teacher has to meet the standards, but not every student has to take music. Whereas elementary, every student has to take music and meet the standards.
Yeah.
Well, I know Jake Huffman plays the tuba.
I've heard rumors. I've never seen it in person.
He performed at, what was that, state basketball or our championship game? Yeah, he was up there in section.
I believe it.
So.
Madam Chair. So Joel, is there a standard minutes of instruction that every elementary student will get? Every student will get X minutes of instruction in music, which will cover all of the standards. Or are we still highly variable depending on what building you're in?
Are you referring to like an ODE requirement or like
in Crook County?
We have not set a set minutes, but I can work with the team to come up with a baseline. I think that makes sense. So that way we can guarantee to parents that students are getting X number of minutes.
I believe that's a really important thing, because no matter what building you go to, you should get essentially the same essential standards, and these are essential standards built into the state guidelines. What started this conversation was we went to a building and we were told, oh, we didn't have an instructor, so we just omitted music. Or at least that's how I understood the statement. That's not okay. That is not meeting the standard of instruction. So I want to make sure that we have a clear, delineated expectation for delivery so that every kid, no matter where they go, gets the same thing.
I love technology, Mr. Cooper. I've already gotten a text just in the last 10 seconds from one of our elementary music teachers said, I will figure out the number of minutes.
Great.
So
But-
That's real time.
Does this music teacher travel, or
No, this would be one
how
of
are
the.
you gonna,
yeah.
how are you gonna get equal at each school if you have,
That's the essence of this exercise.
Yep.
because it sounds like at one school it's done in PE, part of it.
So,
Is that done at all
yep.
schools in PE?
So Barnes Butte has a full-time music teacher, Mr. White, awesome guy. So he has kids in his class 2 days a week, so he covers the standards easily. Here at Steen's Pillar, Janelle Deedon teaches the arts class, and she's going to be the one that embeds music into that arts class. And she texted me and said she'll figure it out. How many minutes? And then I believe it's Melissa Bunting, who teaches the STEAM elective. Getting a nod from Kimberly. Melissa Bunting teaches the STEAM elective at Crooked River, and she'll be embedding music in that as well.
Does ODE have any requirements that they have to be endorsed in music, or how does that
At
work?
the elementary level, there's kind of a broader endorsement of, K-5 education. Yeah, because for example, if you think of Brothers or Paulina, self-contained classrooms where elementary teachers will teach portions of music and social studies. They don't have individual endorsements. They just would have an elementary endorsement.
And it's probably worth noting that there is a bona fide shortage of music teachers. It's hard to find people that have that certification, which is part of why we move toward this more loosey-goosey approach. So are we getting a report back on this?
Yeah, we can report
From
back.
remote?
Maybe once they go through the fall trimester one, report back on how it's working out. I think that's a great idea.
Do you think we could have some kids come sing to us, or see how it's working?
Everyone loves when the kids come and sing. So yeah, we'll definitely figure that out. Ready for, okay, so I heard Shane Scott is not here tonight because he was out rodeoing. Jason Carr is not here tonight, not because he's out rodeoing. I believe he had his father's surprise 70th birthday, so he couldn't make it. But we wanted to follow up on the social media. He has dove into what's out there. I believe Mr. Cooper called it the Wild West of trying to wrangle social media. So there was really three options. We leave it the Wild West. We shut it all down. That was my vote, if we could shut down social media. Or we could find something in the middle and put some guardrails around the practices of internal Crook County School District sites. So he looked at what other districts have done in terms of procedures to put guardrails around social media. So, and here's the procedures that he recommends. So, unlike my preference of shutting down all social media, there are benefits to communicating with families, parents on events. However, we need to put some procedures in place, and here's what we're recommending. Before a program, activity, sport department can start a social media presence that officially represents our schools. So anyone can start a social media for anything. But if you're saying, hey, this is Crook County High School's history department, you are representing the school district in your official capacity. The building administrator and the communication director must approve that account, that they can create that. That also ensures that students aren't running official accounts. We definitely don't want that. So that way we can start tracking that. So here's where we got into it at the work session. Any social media account that officially represents the school district in any way that was established prior to this guidance, because we know there are a lot out there. We are gonna reach out. When I say we, Mr. Carr will reach out. You know, if it's the football team, we can find someone on the football team and say who's running the account. If it's the English department, we can figure out who's running the English department account. And that way we'll just make sure, that'll be a check to make sure it's an actual staff member if they're running an official account that represents the school district. And then finally, these are some guardrails that I think are really important. Any social media account that officially represents the school district department in any way, we're going to make sure they only follow internal CCSD accounts. So that means we want the high school team to follow, the high school football team to follow the soccer team, but we want those to just be internal accounts. So that's our process that our communication department is going to start on, and we just wanted to follow up on that as it was a topic at the work session. Any questions?
Thank you for looking into that, and will we hear a follow-up with Jason maybe? Sorry, I have to look at the site to see how it's working and kind of watch things like
Certainly.
maybe, you know, November or something like that.
You know I make lists. I will put it on a list.
The November board meeting, maybe a follow-up.
Awesome. Any other questions?
Were there any other districts out there that you looked at that didn't allow any? Or very, very limited? Or I mean, what was
You know,
the
Mr.
extreme?
Carr did the most research on this, so I'd have to ask him.
okay.
He found these guardrails as the best out there. So I didn't ask if some did all, some did none. But we feel we need to put guardrails around this. It's like I said, like Mr. Cooper, it's the Wild West, and if someone's officially representing the district, we need to make sure in their official capacity as a staff member that there's guardrails around that. Keep going. All right, 5.5. This again, I'm going to invite Mrs. Lowenbach to come up. We're calling this curriculum updates and back to school nights. This was a big request of the board at our work session. So I'm going to follow up on just a couple items, close the loop on those, and then Mrs. Lowenbach will give some additional details. So let's start with library links and school casts. I think there was a question, why are these links all over in different pages on different school sites? So our awesome technology team has made sure there is a consistent spot that the library database link is on each website. They also have made, with the help of a couple community members, we've gotten feedback to make sure it works. There is a screencast on our website that shows how community members can, how to use our search system if they're interested. So that way no one's confused or anything like that. So that has been created and done. So we just wanted to report back to the board on that.
Are the library links working on mobile phones?
That was one thing that we tested, and we've reached out to the vendor who runs the search. Is called Destiny Fullet. So I know that our tech department has reached out to them and said, this is an issue, please report back. That was, I want to say, mid to late last week. I haven't gotten an update on that yet, but we know that's an issue.
Okay.
Back to school nights. Everyone's gearing up for back to school nights. So we'll put this list out on our social media. Here are the dates. It looks like August 31st for the majority of our in-town schools. We'll be able to meet the staff, see the schools, preview any of your child's curriculum, get your questions answered, see classrooms, sign up to be a volunteer. That was another request of the board to really push volunteer signups now that we're out of the COVID area, as well as bring in supplies. So lots of options. If you're asking, well, what if a parent has kids at multiple schools? Reach out to our awesome administrators. They will happily answer questions, get things figured out, and go from there.
So each school is only going to have one date at the same time. So parents need to navigate a different date with the principal. Like I would have two at the high school and one potentially at an elementary school. So putting two through the high school in 2 hours plus getting over to an elementary school is not feasible, I can tell you that. So me as a parent, it's my responsibility to now have to contact a second principal to find a day and time they're available, or the teacher's going to be available. How are we supposed to do this with families of multiple children?
Yeah, I think we want to find individual solutions that work for families. So I would, reach out to the principal and see, is it, if you're at the high school for an hour, can you jump over and head to the elementary school? But I know they're willing to accommodate, and you'll just reach out because I know there's, we've got about 3,300 students and, 2,000 families, so there's about 2,000 unique situations, and we want to accommodate. So I know our people are willing to work with folks that have questions.
Did we look at adding a second night for schools?
That would require, so there's contractual issues where we're paying teachers, so that would be something that we'd have to look at, put down as a future goal.
And are the libraries going to be open for parents to view? That's not on the list.
Yes.
Okay. If the libraries would be open for parents.
Any other questions on the back to school night? I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Lowenbach.
There
Now
we
it's
go.
now it's really
Now
green.
it's really green. Okay. So after those back to school nights, because at all those back to school nights, all teachers' curriculum will be available for parents to view in each individual classroom. We will collect those binders or those core texts that I don't currently have at the district office, and they will be housed in my office. So if at any point after those back to school nights you would like to review or parents would like to review what is in any class, middle school, high school, elementary school, those are in my office. In fact, most of the elementary curriculum is already there. High school we're working on, and middle school curriculum I mostly have already there in my office. Yeah, and if you want to come into my office at any time, you are more than welcome to reach out and contact me, and I can either help you go through those or make sure that you know where on the bookshelf that those resources are found.
One additional thing before we move on to our next item, Anna, there was a question on the cost of wit and wisdom as part of the curriculum update, and Anna will take that on in her financial report.
Are you going to have all the links for the YouTube videos and what teachers utilize electronically in your office as well, or how do parents preview those? Yeah, actually, we've asked for all teachers, or principals have asked for all teachers, anything that can be printed, even if it's used digitally in the classroom, to please print those. So a lot of teachers utilize Google Classroom, and kids use their Chrome to go in and access articles or passages from reading, but anything that is available to be printed, we've asked them to print. Anything that requires a link, we've asked them to make sure that those links are clean. YouTube a lot of times can bring up a lot of different things, and so we've asked to make sure that those links are clean of suggestions and comments, and then I will have those, as well as those will be the ones that teachers will use. Thank you, guys.
All right, good evening. In front of you, you have a report on the list of instructional assistant positions that we have in our district. That was a request that came forward. So you'll see that in the sheet in front of you, and that has the positions of IAs broken down by school. Across, we have 71 total IAs in our district. So that's in the bottom right corner there. You'll see there's a few in there that do say like 2 new on Barnes Butte, 2 new Crooked River, 1 new Steens. Anna's going to talk a little bit more about those and why they're new when she gets to her financial report. So that'll come out, but those are general ed positions. Those are intended to make sure that there's a instructional assistant in every kindergarten room when we open up here in just a couple weeks. Right now, there's a minimum of half time for each kindergarten teacher. We could go additionally, but Anna will again talk about that during her financial report with everybody. But that's where the new ones come in, is that kindergarten focus, to make sure there's a second adult in the kindergarten rooms.
How come our positions are so varied, do we have, I guess, a greater population and need, or, because, like, I'm looking at Crooked River Elementary has 20, and then Steens Pillar has 6 in total.
Part of that is the size of the school, because Crooked River is about double the size, so they'll have more there. Crooked River is also what we call a Title I school, so there's additional funding that goes with Title I schools. So some of those, Crooked River has an additional 3 staff that are Title I that Steens would not have, not being a title school.
Why is Crooked River that title and not the others?
Title I has to do with an allotment of free and reduced lunch counts. So it depends upon the population of the building and then the threshold of that number. And so that's where the title comes in.
Okay.
Thank you very much for all the work you've put into this. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Moving on to the counselor update, there was a subject brought up about making sure the middle school has a licensed counselor. We've been working on that. We've had a posting out there. We actually do have some qualified applicants in there that we're looking at right now, so to see if they can start the year. But in the meantime, we've put another plan in place to make sure there's a licensed counselor there. We've worked with the high school. We have a new hire, Sean Swick, who has 11 years of counseling experience, who's going to start the year at the middle school if we're not able to find that viable candidate. So we'll actually have that down, and he knows that, as I mentioned his name out there. So he will head down to the middle school to cover if we haven't hired someone out of that pool by then.
Can I ask, I don't know what I can and can't ask. You can just tell me, did we hire him for a different school, knowing our middle school needed
Yes,
one?
we hired him for the high school. And so what we've done is looked at our high school counseling support to see how we can spread out that load temporarily as we look for the middle school, to say how can we make this work. And then we designated at that point who would have the skill set to work with elementary students. We felt that Sean would have that skill set to start the year down there as we continued to look for a middle school counselor. And so that's where we determined who would go down at that point. Sean's also new with this, though he comes with 11 years, like I said, of counseling experience.
Again, Jay, thank you for that. That's good news. I'm happy to hear that.
Thank you.
Organizational charts is next.
Ready for me?
Ann Logan.
Okay. I have included organizational charts in your packet, and these were created from scratch based on your request at the work session. When I first came to work here, I thought that we needed to have organizational charts, and so I started to embark on creating them and then realized this organization is just a little bit, it's quite different from any organization that I've studied or worked at. And their organizational charts in our organization don't really add any value to us, and so we've never had them. And so when you, you started requesting some information and tried to provide what you were looking for and did not hit the mark, if that came across as stonewalling, I apologize. That is not my intent. I just didn't really realize what you were looking for. So once I figured it out, I created these organizational charts. Because they're brand new, we've never had them before, I've put the word draft. I do a lot of disclaimers in my line of work, and so what I'll do is throughout the year, as we find things that maybe need to be tweaked or that I didn't get exactly right, I'll just keep updating them, and then I'll be able to provide these to you on an ongoing basis. I did want to explain, one of the things that makes school districts so unique is when you look at an organizational chart for a school, almost everyone in that school reports to the principal. So if you needed an organizational chart to know what the chain of command is or who reports to who, in our schools, almost everyone reports to the principal. with the exception of a few things like the nutrition services people report to the nutrition services manager, who's not at that school. So when you see like the CCHS one, where there's the nutrition services manager in gray, the gray just indicates that person isn't at that school, but he supervises people that are at that school. I did create this so that it would print on legal, and so if you want these electronically so you can zoom in, they're so small, and I'm sorry, but I can give them to you in a different format so that you can see them a little bit better. But when you print them out on paper like this, it's almost like you need a magnifying glass to see them. Let's see what else I wanted to tell you. So these organizational charts include all positions, even if they're not filled. And some boxes represent multiple positions. So let's say there are 26 teachers at a school. I just made one box and put 26 teachers. Otherwise, it would have gotten even wider. And some boxes on here represent partial positions. So when you're looking at a school nurse, for example, we have a shared school nurse between two schools and then a different shared nurse between two schools. But that's part of why this becomes complex, because some of these people are spread across different pages. Any questions that you have on this, just let me know. You can email me, call me, we can sit down and meet. I'll just give you any information that you need on this. I had to make some guesses on what you were looking for. So, and I will continue to tweak it until you're happy.
So I think overall, Anna, I was looking for, trying to figure out, like Joel said, how are we following the students? Because if you don't know who's at your schools, or, like the example with the counselor situation, how do we justify having this many here and none here? And why do we have this position at this school but not at this school? It's things like that where I was telling Scott just an overall basis of, what do we need at each school? Where are we kind of failing our kids? Because having zero counseling at our middle school, with mental health being such a hot topic and very high in society right now, I didn't even know where our counselors were until I asked for the other list to try to figure out why we have such a shortage. Actually, nothing at one, but such a high volume at the other. So what I was looking for, I don't know if these were created just for me, but what I was looking for is, overall, what are those positions needed at each school? And are they or are they not being filled? Obviously I can see we have more boxes on the high school chart because it's smaller than the middle school chart. So we have either more positions at the high school than we do at the middle school, and what's the reasoning for that? That sort of a thing. Do we have an extra program? Do we need to implement that program at the level below so it's a smoother transition for our kids from middle school to high school? Or that's what I was looking for within our charts, and just trying to figure out where we might be heavy at one school where those people could potentially help out or maybe fill in, level out with our kids. I know that was ultimately my end goal in looking at organizational charts, and I tried to do the same kind of compare, like you said, as I saw the boxes that were different at the high school to the middle school. Well, do our 8th graders need those boxes that we have at the high school to transition over? Are we putting them, is it a shell shock to go from 8th grade to 9th? I don't know, are we lacking? Those are the positions I'm looking for, and we want to try to take some of the burden off of our teachers in a sense of what help do we have for them, whether that be aides, counselors, I don't know what that looks like because I don't know what we have at schools. We don't know how to help them. So ultimately, that's what I was looking for in a sense of organizational charts. I don't know if somebody else was looking for anything else, but.
I think I was looking for to make sure that I see a lot of job titles have changed in different positions, and so I was interested in why those have changed. Are the people in those positions qualified to teach those positions, or have you tweaked the job titles because maybe the qualification isn't there? I'm very interested in that. portion of it?
Okay, so hopefully, I don't think that the organizational charts will answer those questions, but hopefully that you'll be able to go through there and maybe highlight the things that you want to ask or delve deeper into, and then we can look into those. So if I just kind of had like specifics of what you were looking for, I won't know them, but between the team of us, we can figure out the answers.
Yeah, I'm thinking that on the CCHS chart, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what might help Jessica is on some of these, this is, they have 4, maybe 5 boxes that have to do with graduation and that kind of trajectory where you're not going to really have that at the middle school necessarily. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Probably on track with that.
Okay. I think that's probably one
I'm
of
going
the
to need a
extra
magnifying
boxes.
glass to verify.
I was struggling.
But yeah, I think you're right, because you just have different needs at different schools, and
Right.
I'm definitely not the one to justify why, different schools have different things. I just find the money to do the things that, we need to do operationally. So, but I can definitely we can work together to find those specific answers.
So Joel is, like, here's an example. Why do we have assistant principals at almost every school, but a dean of students at Steens Pillar?
Good question. So Barnes Butte, if we're comparing elementary schools, Barnes Butte is probably around high 500 or so. Crooked River is probably around high 500, 580, 590 students. Steens Pillar is around 230, I'd like to say. So 520.
Say Kimberly had the most. on
Low
the list,
low
less than that.
500s, not 500. So a lot of it is just to the point you made earlier, Jessica. Staff follow students. So there is a greater need with a greater number of students. So that's why there'd be an assistant principal at Barnes Butte, and then at Steens Pillar, it's more of a dean, formerly an instructional coach. So it really just comes down to building need, and I think we'll continue to work on balancing those things out.
So do we have a rough idea of enrollment numbers for this year at our schools yet, or?
Yeah, we track that daily in Synergy as people register. So what happens with enrollment, where it's tricky because all the second graders, for example, get rolled up automatically to third grade. However, if they've moved in the summertime and they've moved to Idaho, where we might have them because we've rolled them up, so until we get to the actual first day of school, we wouldn't want to set like, hey, here are our exact numbers, but I can definitely get you rough numbers. I know particularly the high school seems to be substantially higher than it has been in the past, as well as we're seeing some with the apartment buildings that have been built in the Barnes Butte area. Barnes Butte's seen some significant enrollment increases as well. The elementary principals have done an absolutely fantastic job, particularly around kindergarten, where if Barnes Butte kindergarten's full, then they'll be sending them down to Crooked River. So that way that we're having even kindergarten numbers to the greatest extent possible.
So is that a first come, first served basis, or is that off of your address?
So it's off your address, yeah. You have a zones, school zones. So, but we have historically given folks preference if there is a spot. So if there's a spot open, we try to accommodate families. However, in this situation, particularly in kindergarten, because we want to keep those classes balanced, if someone doesn't have siblings, then we'll say, hey, there's actually spots at Crooked River, for example, in this case. So that's where we'd send them. So to try to make them as balanced as possible. It's always going to be a little off. We just try to decrease that margin to the best of our abilities. And Kimberly, Brian, and Taylor have done just an awesome job working together to get those as balanced as possible.
I just mean if a family like moves into Barnes Butte district, that's their district, and they have a kindergartner, but
yeah,
that has 28 students, they have to now go to Crooked River because they didn't enroll first?
Yeah, if there is room, we try to make that happen. If there's not room, what we've seen in the past is if there's a kindergarten class of 24, and then at Crooked River, there's one of 14, that's not good for anyone. So if there's no siblings, and it's more of a conversation than just like, you have to go. So it's a conversation like, hey, there's a smaller class size of 15, and a lot of times they just work that out with the parents.
I think you're good. Yep.
Thank you, Anna.
5.8, Mr. Bonner and Mr. Bliss to talk about fall gym space update.
Can we pull that off for the time being? Because that's winter, actually.
Got it.
That was a spoiler. That was our pretty visual at the end. It's all right, though. So my report, I was asked to kind of paint the picture of fall use, and it's going to be rather dry. It's going to be me reciting basically what we have at each site. If you have any questions, stop me, back me up. I'd be happy to answer that. So this falls from August to the end of October. This does not depict all the events we have. We have the one-offs. We have discretion of the school to have an event, bump a sports team if they need to. So this isn't an all encompassing list. But at the high school, volleyball's from 4 to 7, Monday through Friday through the middle of November, making the state playoffs and extending the season. As of September 27th, high school basketball will begin open gyms after 7 p.m., typically 2 nights per week for boys and 2 nights per week for girls, depending on volleyball home match schedule. So in the fall, the high school, both gyms booked with volleyball, and then 6 weeks from the 14th, basketball can start again and have some open gyms. And then winter sports begin on November 13th. Any questions for kind of what the high school, that's pretty an easy one. It's in-season sports. Middle school, both gyms and Crooked River Elementary. 8:28 middle school volleyball begins. Practices run from 3:30 to 5:30 Monday through Friday through October, so that 2 hours right after school, that's volleyball. 6th grade volleyball uses Crooked River Elementary gym from 3:30 to 5:30 through October. Kids Club leaves the gym and uses other areas in Crooked River during that time. November boys, basketball begins at Crooked River, or Crook County Middle School, 3:30 to 5:30, and 6th grade boys at Crooked River Elementary. And then after boys, so after New Year's, girls basketball starts. Same thing, 3:30 to 5:30 with 6th graders at Crooked River Elementary. And gymnastics is in Parks and Rec gymnastics is at Crooked River Elementary upstairs, Tuesdays, Thursdays, 3 to 6, September through December 15th. So that's for the middle school fall and a peek at what the middle school is doing in the winter. Steen's Pillar, a lot of openings there in the old Pioneer Gym right here. Young Life, Mondays 6 to 9, Wildlife, Wednesdays 6 to 9. And then there's some openings there for overflow or for one-offs, community needs. Barnesville Elementary, Kids Club after school, 3:30 to 5:30, except for vacations. Starting November 1st, Kids Club leaves early, so athletic clubs can start at 5 p.m. Getting club coaches earlier than 5 p.m. is difficult, so in November, that's usually the earliest we can start and want to start. That was dry, no visuals, fall. Is there any questions as far as what our gym space is used for in the fall?
Did the basketball hoops get repaired at the middle school yet?
I think that equipment was supposed to be delivered today, and they've scheduled the work like Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of next week.
So potentially before school starts and these activities get going?
That's what we hope for. If they don't, as long as they don't run into any problems, it should be done next week.
Okay. And then for basketball, the middle school had more kids out for basketball than wrestling, which I didn't know.
Had what kicked out?
They had more kids out for basketball than wrestling. So do we have adequate space? It looks like boys and girls run at separate times, so I'm not sure how many, maybe Adam or Marcus, I'm not sure how many boys and girls you have, but do we have adequate hoops and spaces for?
They can come up and speak to that if they want. I do know that boys and girls basketball are different seasons.
Yeah, so I'm not sure how many they, like if, girls have 30 and the boys have 80, or I don't know what your.
We had about 100 boys go out for boys basketball.
Just work? All right, here we go.
Here you go, you're too tall. There you go.
Yeah, we had about 100 middle school boys go out for basketball last year, which requires us to use all 3 gyms, including Crooked River. We had around 65 to maybe 70 girls go out for basketball last year.
So it was 100 just boys.
Just boys, correct.
Okay. Okay. So hopefully those hoops get fixed quickly. Okay, and so the boys and girls then,
Wrestling and then girls basketball Thursday time. Boys are different season than girls.
Yes, so
Okay.
boys basketball goes from November 1st till winter break, and then girls basketball starts up right after winter break and goes through February, which coincides with wrestling.
okay, is that on your next spiel, wrestling, or?
I listed that in this, and you didn't have a visual, but I can show you in this winter sports. It's
Okay.
mostly clubs,
Thanks, Adam.
but I'll be able to show a visual and explain that.
Okay.
Any other questions on fall?
Rob, I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Do we utilize, and I only know it as Ochoco Gym,
Mhm.
do we utilize that during the fall for anything?
Well, the school does not. It's Parks and Rec mostly, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah, when we sold that, I haven't been in since.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I think we're ready for the. All right. So what you see here is this starts November 1st through March 31st. The reason we need this is because winter sports is the club season, is the start of the club season. So you see all these youth teams. So the coaches get together every year. This was 22-23. So here, when school starts, we'll get together as coaching staffs and club coaches. We'll see what needs we anticipate for this year, shuffle this around a little bit, but the bones will stay the same. The blacked out that you see, that takes care of mostly the middle school and high school during the in-season sports. So if you look at CCMS main gym there, that column that runs down, 4 to 6 is blocked out. Usually 3:30 to 5:30 is girls volleyball starting now, girls basketball, which starts in November, boys basketball that starts in, no, I got that backwards. Boys basketball starts first in November, girls basketball starts with wrestling after January 1st, or after the new year. So that's why that's blacked out, to save the gym space for those specific schools. And then after 6 o'clock is when, the mayhem begins. We have all the clubs that come in. The problem with this, you'll see junior cowboys, cowgirls, young rimrock players in the gyms, 7:30 to 9. It's late. We're squeezing, every ounce we can out of those weekdays, and it's just what we've been dealing with. We need more gym space. So.
Rob, how many nonprofit clubs do we have that come in to practice in the gyms?
So our main clubs are Junior Cowboys, Junior Cowgirls, Rimrock. Cheer isn't a club. That's our high school cheer team what we're looking at there. Dance. Yeah, right now we don't have a dance team, but that's high school, so that's not a club. So our big clubs are the Rimrock, boys and girls basketball. Young Life. Young Life comes in and uses the Pioneer Gym here. Indoor track is high school. Yeah, the kids club is using, they're in the blackout section, and that's up to the elementary schools.
I just can't read it because my eyes
Oh,
are.
I understand. Yeah, and I can get you hard copies, whatever you need. So I can email that to the board too.
So what are we doing in winter time at the middle school because I'm pretty sure we had an inspection done and they're allowed 35 kids upstairs for wrestling, and I believe we had close to 80 this last season. So is that gym over at Crooked River where gymnastics is going that has mats? Is that possible for the middle school to utilize? Or how does Jake Schinkel run 80 kids through a room
Right.
that holds 35?
You know, I can let the middle school AD speak to that, but what I can say is upstairs at Crooked River Elementary is a 10 by 10 foot mat. So if you were to count off 10 squares by 10 squares, that's, you can maybe put 6 kids on there. It's a small mat. The rest of that space is gymnastics equipment or whatever. But I mean, you say there's mats up there. There's one small mat that really doesn't help us any.
Can we move the equipment and all the rolled up mats at the high school be placed up there?
The mats at the high school are being, you're talking the mat club mats?
The ones that sit on the
Runs
back
up.
wall?
Those are the mat club mats, and they get farmed out to different tournaments and things. So that wouldn't be a, I mean, yes, you could, but that's not a very viable option. If that space was to be utilized for wrestling, which, you know, you're splitting practices and whatnot, I don't know how the coaching staff, I'm not speaking for them, but buying mats for that space would be the most viable option, and that's an
But
expense.
is that an option to move whatever equipment's up there? Or I'm just, seems like basketball with having the amount of gyms to utilize Crooked Rivers and the 2 at the middle school with how many kids we have going out for middle school sports, that works. But we have, I mean, almost double, a little more than double what's allowed in our room at the middle school. So we either have to cap that or figure out a viable solution so all kids can participate. So I'm just looking for options,
The
not
main
anything set in stone.
Right. The main solution would be for, you know, Mat Club and the middle school is working really hard to build that wrestling room, right? That's the need. That's what needs to happen. And then the rest of it, you know, the temporary solutions, I don't want to speak for them because that's not my situation. So the AD and the coaching staff can answer any questions you need there. But we need that wrestling room. I can speak to that. Mhm.
Hey, Rob, what's the size difference between the middle school and the Crooked River space? Where she's talking about and what the rest.
So I haven't stepped that off, but very, very
pretty,
similar.
seems pretty similar, I think, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The middle school is right there. I will. Don't mind if I do.
Team effort here.
Yeah, so we've brainstormed a bunch of ideas. None of them at this point are anything that we really are excited about. Splitting practices. The other side of the upstairs gym is currently a weight room that we have talked about breaking down to then fit in a few more mats, which still wouldn't get us to, if we were at 80 again, still wouldn't get us to that square foot per wrestler. And so that's where it was just mentioned with that additional mat room is huge. And I know there's been a lot of work in the community going towards that. And since summer, I haven't heard much of an update, but that is important. And I think that's a direction that everyone's been working towards. But we've been talking about a lot of different options. Running kids over to Pioneer, we've had a lot of options and trying to figure out what we can do in terms of, and then how to split practice, equitable and male, female, upper weights, lower weights. So we've been brainstorming a lot, and we don't really necessarily like anything we're brainstorming.
So it sounds like we would have to start with mats to begin with. We don't have enough mats anyways for 80 plus kids, because it sounds like we capped that and actually had more kids that wanted to participate, but not the room to house them. So it's kind of like basketball needs hoops, volleyball needs nets, wrestlers need mats. So sounds like we're also short on the equipment for that sport as well at the middle school level. So I don't know how much those mats in the high school room get farmed out, as they're there every time I'm there, but they could be utilized other times. So, but I don't know if moving those mats to Pioneer's gym, I'm trying to follow this in a sense of, I don't know who uses Pioneer because it's blacked out. So is that basketball, Rob? That line across is all basketball, or?
So from 4 to 6 at Pioneer, is that what you're looking at?
Yeah, what's the black again? Sorry.
So that would be up to this school and the people that are using it. So,
Oh, okay.
so that's, we don't touch that time because that's up to the school. So if they need that for their kids after school.
Okay, gotcha. So
And
after
in the
school.
case of the middle school and the high school, it's athletics, of course, and Crooked River. But the other two, that's up to the school.
Okay, got it.
And on times when sports teams aren't using Crooked River, then that 4 to 6 is up, that's up to their disposal as well. We oftentimes use it for inclement weather and, smoke and cold and whatnot.
Yeah, okay.
The middle school practice, does it take place directly after school, like 3:30?
Yes, that's what they told me. Yeah.
What about using like the cafeteria or something like that? If you had mats you could roll out. Is that
At
a
the middle school?
possibility at the middle school?
Did you hear that? You want to talk to that?
Leland might be able to add as well, just with the idea of cafeteria is not big at the middle school either, so that would work. We'd have to take down tables up and down and roll out mats. I mean, that could be feasible. You talk about resources, then with the mat tape, retaping mats every day and going through that process and then storing the mats. The way our cafeteria is set up currently, unless mats are hauled in, Leland, do you have an idea on? I think they'd have to be hauled into the cafeteria every day as well.
Yeah, I don't know where we would actually store the mats, because that cafeteria is packed during lunch.
Yeah.
So there wouldn't be room for all the tables, all the kids, and a set of mats. So the mats would have to be stored somewhere and then brought in. And that cafeteria is actually just kind of long and narrow, so it's not, it's not great room for mats.
So have we looked at a solution for this season in a sense of the capacity of rooms and schools getting ready to start? Have we kind of?
Yeah, and I've had conversations, not recently with Coach Schinkel and Bates, but the idea is that we'd have to find some space at this point, that we'd have to split practices and doing conditioning and rotating kids in. So that's kind of our best option.
Okay. And then how does that look for basketball for you guys? You seem to have the highest number of, and I could be wrong, high school may have more. Sorry, Rob, don't mean to
No, we do not.
discredit you.
You're correct.
Okay. And is basketball is what we have sustainable or efficient? I don't know if we have rules on how many kids can be in the gym.
No,
I don't know.
No, the gyms allow a lot more. And then with like basketball and running an effective practice, you can put 6 kids, 7 kids on a hoop, rebounding, shooting, and setting up some stations that way that allows basketball with us using the 2 at the middle school and then Crooked River. That is, that works.
So how do you guys do that? Split them by age or what?
Yeah, in middle school basketball, there's 8th grade, 7th grade, 6th grade. So they're split, and then we usually have an A and a B team for each grade. 6th grade is a little bit more of an intramural, so they don't necessarily make teams. They practice together, and then they kind of divide and play some scrimmages.
Okay. Okay. So we need another facility.
Yes.
We do need another facility.
Scott was saying that already.
I just want to comment again that I love this problem. If this is our biggest problem, we have too many kids that want to participate, not enough room, that's a pretty good problem to have. We can fix that problem, and will. I did have one other wrinkle to throw into your planning there, Rob.
Sure.
Have you ever looked at the time that we have assigned to the teams from a Title IX lens to make sure we have equity for the earlier preferred times being evenly split between the boys and the girls? Because I have heard concern, I don't know if it's valid or not, that we have the girls pushed off to the less desirable times and the boys dominating the earlier times.
So no, because our coaches won't allow that. There's a lot of conversation between, hey, you've got these prime spots, I need this number, and so they work on that. I'll look at it closely and have that conversation when we make the 23-24 schedule, but I'm confident that we're not pushing girls.
Right. I would encourage you to do the analysis.
Okay.
You don't necessarily need to report it back, and keep an eye on it. It's not the coaches that are going to get hit with a Title IX complaint. It's going to be the board.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd really like to know we're safe on that.
So I do too, and Title IX has been a focus of mine for 10 years, so I've looked at that and continue to do so, so I'll look again. Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other questions for Rob or Leland? No?
I'll be here
Thank
all
you.
night. You go ahead. Thank you, guys.
I'd like a copy of that, though,
You got
if
it.
possible.
So I'll send an email copy to the board.
Cool, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, next order of business is our school board update. So 6.1 is our permanent superintendent search firm committee update. So we had a committee that was voted on in our July 5th meeting that consisted of 2 board members, 2 administrators, and a retired teacher and a parent or current teacher. She was both, so I know I crossed both boxes. And we were given 3 different options to look through. Our packets are kind of out of order, but Jay, we have, oh, right here, sorry. We had, I wrote down who. As a committee, we were given proposals that Jay Weeks, I guess, was given or solicited. I'm not sure the right terminology for that. And that was Robert Hess, OSBA, and McPherson and Jacobson. So our committee was given all 3 of those potential firms to look at. And over consideration and debate amongst the group of us, we'd like to bring to the board to recommend Breakthrough Consulting, BTC. Overall, I think Jay put in here kind of what we found and what allowed us to score them higher than the other firms.
Can you repeat the 3 that you had? I didn't get them all, sorry.
Oh, that's okay. We had, yep, Robert Hess, which is BTC, OSBA, and McPherson and Jacobson.
Okay, so I have questions. Sorry, I was making a list. So there were 3 different firms, and then did they send you bids?
Yes.
Did each one, so I didn't see that we had any bids in here other than the one you were recommending.
Yeah, we submitted the one we were bringing to the board in the packet. Not sure Jay could get you a copy of the other 2 if needs be.
And then from the verbiage that you guys had written up, they were each scored? Is
Yep.
that right? With a rubric of some sort?
Yes, Jay.
Is that also in that Jay can send us? Okay. Okay, thank you. And did you guys do any interviews? Did you interview any of them? Or did it just go off your recommendation of what the bid was that came in?
So we are just recommending to the board that we utilize a firm. That's what our committee was asked to do. Jay did verify with BTC once our committee came to the conclusion of selecting them that they, A, were still interested in working with our district, and B, that their quote was still accurate. That's in your packet.
So, Madam Chairman, I think we're a little off track. I don't believe that the committee was ever asked to recommend the search firm, but there was a lot of unclarity around that, so I could see how the committee might have gotten itself to that position. I believe that the committee was asked to recommend the process, by which I mean we would hire a search firm versus do, our own independent search, which was in play at that time. who would review the applications when they came in? Would we have a citizen, give citizens the opportunity to do that, a citizen committee? Would just the board do it? Would staff be involved? And then who would do the actual interviews? Would we have meet and greets? Would we do, all that process, which I don't see in this response here. I do feel like we prematurely maybe rushed to the selection of the search committee over fleshing out the extended process.
Okay. We were asked as a committee, my understanding was to look at the firms and decide whether we were going to utilize Jay Weeks to do the process in-house or if we were going to utilize one of the firms, and we had 3 to choose from. So you're saying you want to make a committee to select the firm?
No, I believe the board should select the firm after looking at all 3 applicants and then making its decision about that. I don't think we have the full process of how the whole thing is going to play out at this point.
Okay.
And like I said, that was the very first meeting, as I recall. There was lots of dynamics going on that night. I'm not blaming anybody because I think there was room for misunderstanding there. But I don't think we quite got where I thought we were going to get.
Okay.
I think, Scott, in the discussion that we had when we were in with the committee, we were, I think your advice was heavily weighing on all of our minds that we needed to get going on figuring out in which direction we wanted to go and if we wanted to do just open it up to the public or look at a search firm. And so in the discussion, that was like we weighed that out, and having done opening it up to the public for the interim, it seemed like a less complicated process to look at a firm. And I think that's what we were looking at in that committee. Was the process that you had expressed was like we need to get going on this like right away so that we can get some good applicants.
Yeah. I'm not opposed.
I'm somewhat handicapped in this because I don't know this Robert Hess firm. I've never heard of them or seen them. I do know the other 2 that came through, and maybe they'll be fine. They do seem to focus on small districts.
They do.
And they seem to be new.
I don't know. Well, they're probably newer than like OSBA. But overall, like one of our committee members pointed out, they worked with a lot of same size districts. If you look at the districts they had worked with and who their references were in that, but I mean, I'm not opposed to you looking over the firms either. I don't quite understand the point of the committee we made, I guess. So it's no big deal, like I said.
I think too, Jay, I don't want to speak for you, but we relied heavily on Jay's expertise in looking at the other 2 firms and some research that Jay had done, and reaching out to other districts who had used those firms and different things and getting feedback. So that weighed heavily into our decision too, was Jay's expertise in that area.
Could we ask Jay to join us at the table and talk through this?
Yeah.
Probably bring the expert will be better than the amateurs.
Yes.
Including
Scott.
myself in that category.
I was looking back at the minutes from that meeting. Would you like me to read that section? Ooh, that's blurry. Cheyenne moved, Scott seconded that CCSD look for one more firm, then the committee bring that information to the board. Jessica asked what the search would look like, I'm assuming, if CCSD did the search process. Jay said it was similar to the process with the search firm. Cheyenne would like retired school teachers to be on the committee to select the search firm and a current parent. That's what the minutes say.
So that's that lack of clarity that I was talking about. It's not clear exactly what.
Correct. It didn't say go bring us a proposal.
We did say go find us one more firm.
Yeah.
For sure. Jay, maybe you could outline from your understanding, and that would satisfy me. Once we get applications in through whatever search firm we use, then what? Where do we leave that in the meeting?
Yeah, when we select a search firm, whoever we select, what they would do is come back to the board and sit down with the board in an open session to talk about what is your desires as a board. What are you looking for? What's your process look like? So whether or not you want to visit a district, whether or not you want to have your interview cycle the way it is, how many you want to bring in, what does that look like, is all done then with the search firm. So that would get lined out with whoever was selected. Rob Hess, which is the one that was brought forward tonight, is a relatively new. They started in 2018. It was founded by a former superintendent. He was a teacher, assistant principal, and then superintendent. He left his superintendent's role in 2018, and that's when he started Breakthrough Consulting. So his specialty has worked more with some smaller districts in our state than some of the others. Some of the others we looked at, McPherson and Jacobson, is more of a larger search firm. So they come and work actually nationwide. They just have people in each state that help do that work. And then OSBA is Oregon School Boards Association. So they're more centralized, just in Oregon, but through the OSBA. So we looked at those. We scored them on different metrics of what we thought. One of the things that we liked about Rob Hess as we looked at them and broke down is they were customizable. So he was really willing to work through what the board wanted. So almost like an a la carte type menu. So he had it down there. The board would be able to say, hey, this is what I want to do. This is what I don't want to do. And he would do that with you at a board meeting and sit down and do that. So that was one of the pieces we liked about him. He did offer an option to do some coaching. We didn't decide to recommend any of that because we hadn't fully worked with him. We'd only talked to him at that point on a phone, or I had. So we wanted to make sure that we were comfortable with him before we'd go down that path of adding something, a la carte of that for a superintendent coming in. But that was some of the reasons, and there were some others in your board packet that aren't coming to my mind off the top of my head of where we selected him.
I think one of the things that you had noticed was in the other two firms, they had in their financial area, they had a lot of could charge for this, a lot of with travel and meals and different things like that. So that cost could add up quite substantially. I think I remember that being one of the main things. We felt there was some wording in there that could lead to be very expensive.
Yeah, what we were looking at too when we looked at the cost of it, Breakthrough Consulting was also the most economical of the bunch. By upwards, I think the nearest one was around $4,000 more than what Breakthrough Consulting came through as.
Just a couple of other comments about Breakthrough. We all got some character assassinating emails today about Breakthrough. And I did go Google Mr. Hess, and I noticed two things: that he was a finalist when Shay Michelson was hired at Ben Lapine. So he'd obviously gone through the process and made it to their final selection process. He wasn't selected, but clearly he has the educational credential heft to get their respect. He was superintendent in Lebanon when that ended with a bang, but that wasn't the most functional situation. So I don't think you would hold that against necessarily the person that was there. I probably am fine with this as far as being able to move forward. It wasn't what I was expecting, but I think I can get okay with it.
I guess ultimately, if you're looking for, our committee decided to go the route of a firm, maybe that's what you're looking for. And if you want to look through the other two applicants, which I believe were a part of your first set.
I've seen the other two proposals. I don't
Yeah.
know if everybody else has or not.
So, but I mean, with the miscommunication, it doesn't matter to me either way. Obviously there was a disconnect, and I guess for the point of the committee, the 6 members of us that got together, if we had one that dropped out and one more that submitted an application, so we didn't have a choice of what to bring you in a sense of another firm. There was only one more, so it would be the 3 we listed off anyways. So, but we
I don't know,
move it to
Mr. Huffman, you were on that committee. Would you recommended Mr. Hess? Would you like to speak to it at all, or I don't want to put you on the spot or have you play an instrument or anything, but maybe. Well, you were on the selection committee and,
So you want me to talk about why we selected Rob Hess?
yeah, or what your thoughts were on it, because you were part of that.
So for me, it was important that we, and I'm speaking as one person, but for me, it was important that we had a selection committee, a search firm of some kind. So I really didn't want to, our school district to, to have the burden of trying to select or trying to find or, do that work on their own. So I wanted to make sure that we could find something that we could all agree on. And it seemed like that Dr. Hess was the one that we could all agree on. And then some things that I liked about it was that if you look at some of the school districts in which his consulting group is doing, like I think currently they're looking for doing a superintendent search for North Bend School District. And so some of those school districts are similar demographic to ours. And so that gave me some comfort as well.
And we did look up, I don't remember if you asked this or not, but Anna did look up, we've used a search firm. We used it for Dr. Yucca and we used it for Dr. Johnson.
It's the
So,
standard way to do it.
yeah. So we did follow up with Anna. So, and she, I don't remember if you could find the search firm for Dr. Yucca, but she was able to find the one for Dr. Johnson, which didn't exist anymore, didn't submit. I can't remember which.
He retired.
Retired.
And we contacted him, and he considered coming out of retirement to help us, but then just decided that he needed to stay retired. And then I don't remember the name of the firm that we used for Dr. Yucca, and I don't think they exist anymore.
So we did look at the previous firms we've used as well.
I do think we should address the elephant in the room that was brought to us by social media and the emails, which is that some people are alleging that we're pushing breakthrough through specifically so that it will recruit Mark Thielman to be our next superintendent. I want to say to the people that sent that information out today that, I respect your concern, but at the end of the day, the way we select a superintendent is they need 3 votes. That's the only way they get selected. And I don't think the process is going to necessarily determine the outcome. We don't look to the consultant to tell us who to hire. We look to them to round up candidates, then we interview them, and there will either be 3 votes or they won't. So I don't think this decision tonight is determinative of where we're going to end up.
Yeah, overall, the point of the firm is to collect the data. As we saw doing it ourselves with the interim process was a disaster. So having a firm to utilize in privacy and all the questions that people have, they can utilize the firm in asking those questions to, as opposed to Jay's workload, Anna's workload, Heather's workload, in that sense. But again, we can bring the other 2 to the next board meeting for Jennifer and Steve. You've seen them. Cheyenne and I were on this committee, so. Oh, no, it was only those 3. Yeah, the one that the previous board wanted to go with pulled their, they pulled their proposal. So we had the 2 existing and then BTC that submitted theirs. And that was given to all committee members, Jake, Patty, Cherie, Cheyenne, and Jay. Sorry, Jay.
So what would be the expectation if we didn't move forward with this tonight? I mean, if you didn't approve this, what would be the expectation of a next move?
So we would need to, I guess, then move it out of the committee's hands and vote as a board on which firm we want to use. So we would put it on the next board meeting, and you and Jennifer could review who else, or if you'd like someone different, you can bring that to the table, and then we would again have to have a majority vote.
And the other 2 firms, when we were discussing it, the previous board did not choose them as well,
Right.
those other 2 firms. So they were the 2 left over, because the one that you guys had chosen had pulled out.
Right.
And so we decided that if they didn't choose them for a reason, then I weighed that, I'm not going to speak for everybody, into consideration as well.
I'm ready to adopt this, but I defer completely to you, Steve, and you, Jennifer. If your comfort level's high enough to adopt it, I'm there. If you need more time, then I'm with you.
I think I had my questions answered. I had written it up this morning with all my questions. I just wanted to see, and it seems like it was quite the discussion that everybody had. So thank you for all of the information.
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Well, then, if you're good.
Do you
make
want a motion then? Is that what you want? Madam
Thank you,
Chair,
Jay. Thank you, Jake.
I move to select Breakthrough Consulting as a search firm to recruit applicants for the permanent superintendent position for the 24-25 school year.
I second.
So now we vote. Oh, my mic is on. All those in favor of hiring BTC as our firm for our permanent superintendent search, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Okay. So, Leland again. You're a popular man tonight, Leland. So, Leland, I kind of brought this up because we had taken this committee off when we assigned the committees. And it sounds like from talking with members here that it might be better off I don't know if you want to utilize the same group or having this group to continue putting together information that potentially we could use towards a bond, since you guys have done so much work into that.
So I'd like to give you a little bit of history go clear back to the beginning with the Long Range Facilities Committee, so you guys all kind of know how that all developed. So when we decided to look at going out for a bond, we actually we applied for TAP grants through ODE. Those will help pay for your assessments and the writing of a long-range facilities plan, because you have to hire an architect to do that. So we did that. We used like staff and board members to suggest people for that original committee. So we didn't. I don't think we advertised it outside. I don't remember if we did or not. And when we picked that committee, they worked with the architect. We worked as a team to write the long-range facilities plan. Those plans are good for 5 years. So after we did that, the committee made a recommendation to the board, and then to go out for a bond. And then we went out for the bond. After the bond did not pass, we kind of took some time, and then we reestablished a new committee. So the new committee, it was in 2022 is when we started the second committee. We actually advertised. We got more community members. We kind of opened it up to anybody that really wanted to be on the committee. We had like a couple meetings, and then things kind of fizzled out, and we didn't continue with that committee at the time. So what I'd like to do is if the board wants me to pursue this and to revive the committee under the direction of the superintendent, I will recruit for new members. So we'll advertise for new members. We'll set up one meeting and start to go through the whole process. We'll look at the long-range facilities plan. We'll look at the wants and needs list, and then we need to talk to coaches, any of the stakeholders that would be involved and what they want for the bond, and then we can put another proposal together and make a recommendation to the board for another bond.
Leland?
Yes.
So being on that committee twice, now going through that system and that process, the second one was different than the first one just by a little bit. Are you going to just go back to square one and start all over, or are you going to try and blend those two back together, or what? Do you have an idea of what you're thinking about doing, or because they were two separate but similar directions?
I have an idea of what I'd like to do, but I'd like the very first meeting, I want to get the whole original long-range facilities plan out, because it's important that we follow that for the Awesome Grant. You do have to follow some of the stuff that's in the long-range facilities plan. I mean, you can do more than what's in there, but we do have to focus on that. So I would like to get the committee together, focus on that, and then start looking at the things that we kind of brought up in those second and third meetings that we have all the minutes of that and everything else, so we can actually start using that and try and put together some kind of plan to move forward. So we need to look at what's really important, what's not, not important, because that bond's going to be a big bond. Or do we not do a big bond? I mean, there's a lot of things we can do.
Yeah, I'm not as familiar with bonds and the writing of it, but I think we could maybe go about it two ways, like the must-haves and the wants, I guess you could call them, roofs, heaters, sewage systems, the necessities, heaters, that's air conditioning, windows at schools that have never been replaced, something like that, as opposed to, I mean, it's really cool to have new things, don't get me wrong, but maybe just the potential of the needs of our district in that sense as well. I don't know if there's, I don't know how bonds work, if you can do like two options or you do just one gigantic one, or I heard, I guess in the last bond for me, like I heard more of the really cool glitzy stuff as opposed to, really knowing and looking into, we have 4 schools needing roofs, one that needs a sewage system upgrade, some that have heaters or boilers from when this district was built, those sort of things that wasn't necessarily on my radar as just a person in the community from that sense. So I don't know if that adds to your work, if that's possible, where it's like.
I have most of those lists already done, so.
Okay.
But I mean, when you do look at marketing the bond, I think it depends on probably what the consultant tells us to do as to how we do it.
Okay.
And a lot of people want the really glitzy things. They think that sells the bond.
Okay.
To me, new roofs and boilers sells the bond,
Yeah,
but
me
not
too.
everybody thinks that's.
But I'm just one person, so I was just curious, does that affect what grants you, that awesome grant and those things, or?
So the awesome grant, it's going to be increased. Right now, it's $4 million. So when I applied this year, if we were to go out for a bond, we would have gotten, and passed it, we would have gotten $4 million. Next, on the next cycle, that minimum goes up to $8 million. So if you do a bond that's big enough, so you'd have to do a bond that's at least $8 million because it's a matching grant.
Okay.
So if you did a bond for $20 million, you would still be able to get that awesome grant. But if you wanted to go like 2 years from now and do another bond, you would have to do another long-range facilities plan and assessment, and then you'd have to apply for another awesome grant at that time.
How often do you apply for these grants?
I usually put our application in every time it comes around, just in case the board wants to say, yep, we're going out for bond. I already have it. I have it ready to go all the time. So I've been submitting it every time that it comes about.
Okay.
Do you remember what the value was if you had to restart and go start from scratch again? Again, hiring that architect and going back, doing that foundational piece again versus picking up where we left off right here?
So last time it was about $50,000 for the architect and the consultants. But we get TAP grants that we can apply for to help pay for that too.
What are the deadlines for those?
I
Do you have,
don't
like,
know
a
off the top
time
of my
frame,
head.
or-
So,
Okay.
so if we were to go out for a next year, May, I have to submit everything like December 1st and December 15th. That's where everything has to be submitted. Yeah. The TAP grants, I don't know. We're not eligible for a TAP grant. You have to wait 5 years, so we're not eligible to get any of them right now.
Thank you, Leland.
Mhm.
So-
Thank you.
So are we taking action on this, or what are we doing with this?
Oh, I thought the action was just on the search firm. not for-
I mean, I heard
Oh.
Leland make a request that
That's
we
right,
give
yes.
him permission to
Sorry, Leland.
reactivate a facilities search committee, right?
I think I
Start the
should probably
process.
have at least a nod from the board to proceed with that. I don't know if it needs action. Does that need to be on the agenda that way?
So my suggestion would be we make a motion to authorize Leland to start that process and bring us some candidates at the next meeting. This gives a month to search out some people to go on the committee.
Do we vote on that?
That is a motion. I move
Oh.
to authorize Leland to start a facility search committee process and identify candidates to bring to the board next month.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor of Scott's motion, say aye. Aye. Okay. There you go, Leland.
Thanks a lot.
Yep. Okay, so number 7 is our policies. So the first one is IIA-AR. And you can see from the slight change, as Scott and Joel said, in regards to what was asked, is in section 3E, under that, that would be the provision, changing that from at least 5 community members selected from the school volunteer list to 5 community members appointed by the school board.
Madam Chairman, I'd like to just speak to this one. This is an amendment that I strongly support. We had an incident where a person who had done a huge amount of work to review our math curriculum wanted to be on the curriculum review committee and got caught in a technical glitch because she wasn't on the volunteer list at a particular school, and we lost that talent. So I'd very much like to see us make the process open to anyone who wants to come forward and offer their expertise so we can get best decisions possible. And I would move to adopt policy 2AAR on instructional materials.
I second.
Okay, so we'll vote on Scott's motion to adopt the new wording to this policy. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. The next policy we're going to cover is BDDH, and in our workshop, this was brought up, our work session at the end of July, I think by Cheyenne, we're looking at extending the time under number 5 from 2 minutes to 4 minutes for public comment. It's your motion.
I motion to vote on this.
I second that motion.
Okay, so we'll take a vote to update this policy from 2 minutes to 4 minutes. All those in favor, say aye. Okay, Anna, we're on to you, our finance report.
Thank you. So the finance report that's in your packet is a continuation of the prior fiscal year. This will be the last report that you see on the prior fiscal year until I present the audited financial report to you, usually in November. So this, keep in mind, this is still a projection. We're closing out last fiscal year, and the reason why everything's not done is because there are certain accounting rules that make us or allow us to wait 60 days after the end of your fiscal year, and then there are a lot of things that you have to do to go back and adjust. So September 1st is when I can start doing all those adjustments, and then those will make adjustments to these numbers. They're usually not huge, and I usually try to anticipate most of them, but just know that these are not final. So as you look at the page 4 of the 8.1 financial report, that's the general fund projection. It's probably the most important page in this report. The most noteworthy thing on here is line 17, which is the transfers out, and that's, again, a projection. So what that is, we'll talk more about this when we get to 8.3, but basically, every year we create a budget, which is our best guess. And then if we're lucky, which we have been, things turn out better than what we had anticipated. And that has happened to the extreme this past fiscal year, which has left us with, and we've known as we've gone throughout the fiscal year, we've known that these things were happening. And so I talked to the previous board that, this is going to be going on. And when we reach the end of the fiscal year, we will have basically a surplus in the general fund. And so what we have always done, as long as, as I can remember, what we do is when we have a surplus, there's a certain amount of money we need to roll forward to the next fiscal year in order to continue operations. But anything above that, we use to solve problems, current problems and future problems. And so that's what that line 17 is doing, is it's estimating that basically anything above what needs to roll forward will be transferred out into another fund. When you look at that, you might be concerned because it does look like it's over budget. But the reason why it's not going to be a problem is because a lot of the transfers will come out of the general fund 100 and go into other funds that start with a 100, start with a 1. And so basically, they don't count towards budget if an auditor or if the state were to look and see if we met our budget, those don't count towards that. So basically, I just wanted to assure you that that's not going to be a problem if you saw that and you were concerned about going over budget there. If you have any questions further about that, I do better when I'm drawing pictures and sitting down. So feel free to meet with me and we can go over this more. Just, I want to make sure that you understand it because it is kind of complex. So really, that's all I had on the finance report. And just if you have any questions, otherwise I'll go into 8.2.
So Anna, of the surplus funds, I don't know what they can be used towards. Like we had the trap club that came. Is that something where we can use some of those funds to help aid a program in need, or is
Absolutely.
it in the schools? Or okay.
Yep.
So how does that go about? How do you move to
when we get to
other
8.3,
programs?
I'll show you.
Okay.
No, I mean, I can talk about it now, but I'll be repeating it.
It's okay. Yeah, that's fine.
Oh, I was just wondering about like donating some to the wrestling room or something, like, because I know the community has raised quite a bit of funds, and seeing if we could like match something or if that's possible to do that.
Yes. Mat Club.
The Mat Club.
Cowboy Mat Club.
Is there
And we
a-
wouldn't necessarily donate.
As I say, I don't know if you can do that, can you?
We could just put the money towards the mat room. We wouldn't necessarily have to donate, because what we're going to do with the Mat Club, they will raise all the money and then give it all to the school district, and then the school district will hire all the contractors and pay the contractors. We have to make sure that we follow public contracting rules and all those things, and we need to make sure that the school district owns the asset at the end. So we would just contribute our amount of money, and that's also in 8.3.
Okay.
Anna, I've heard us talk about adding new IAs and adding a new SRO. Was that all within existing budgeting resources, or did that already come out of this surplus?
It's coming out of a new, I have 3. Should we just skip to 8.3? We can come back to 8.2, because I think we're going into that conversation, and I think it makes sense just to skip into that. So if we can just skip forward to 8.3. I have 3 lists here for you, and I want to explain all of them. So the first one is for the new fiscal year, 2023-2024, that we're in right now. That is a list of things. Well, let me back up. So what's happening is, in the new fiscal year, we will receive state school fund revenue that's significantly more than what we budgeted. When we were building the budget, we were using the best information we had at the time, based on what the legislature was building their budget on. And there was advocacy to increase the state school fund, so we bumped our budget up a little bit, but then when the legislature actually adopted the state budget, they increased it more than what we could have anticipated. I mean, it was just way higher than what we thought. So what that ended up doing is the state reestimates what each school district will get, and ours is going up by $1 million, possibly more, but I want to be conservative. So that's what this list is. So it's basically taking $1 million and saying, what are all the things that we could potentially use that money for? And we won't take action on this tonight, but it will require a budget adjustment. It's about 8% of our general fund budget. $1 million, it seems like a lot of money. It's 8% of our total budget, but we can do a lot with that. So I wanted to, what I do is I listen to the board, I listen to staff, administrators. I try to pick up what are the problems we're facing now, what are the problems we might be facing in the future, and I keep lists so that when things like this happen and we have money that we didn't anticipate, we have ways of addressing those problems rather than waiting until it's, completely an emergency and then scrambling trying to figure something out. So when I have these 3 lists and I think about, is this permanent ongoing money or is it one-time money? And if it's permanent ongoing money, that's the kind of thing that we would pay for permanent ongoing costs, like staffing. If it's one-time money, that's where we would pay for things that are one-time costs, like building a wrestling room, helping to build a wrestling room, those kinds of things. And so that's how I kind of figured out which lists to put things on. So I just want to go through all these things. I have an hour and a half, so. I won't.
Not on Scott's time.
Don't worry, I speak fast. So, all right. So when you take the $1 million and you just start adding things into the list, one of the things that happens is Pal Butte Charter automatically gets a certain amount of pass-through. So their pass-through amount will increase. So we need to account for the fact that that will be an additional expense. That's just right off, that's non-negotiable. The board had mentioned potentially adding a new school resource officer next year, but we could use this money to start doing that this year. And I've already started talking with the police department, and they're excited about it as well. And then, of course, the school counselor at the middle school. You all know about that one. For the Clay Target League, I didn't really know what number to put in there, so I just picked a number based on kind of what they've spent in the past, and you guys can adjust it if you want to. Sure. The before and after school options, this is really a guess. I know that we're able to do some of the additional staffing for, I think it's before school, at kind of a minimal cost, but I don't know if that's going to cover all schools and after school. So Jill and I talked about putting that number in there. And again, that can be adjusted. We do have, as was mentioned earlier, we have an increased enrollment at Barnes Butte, and so we need to add a teacher. That's one of the, when we say staffing follows students, that's one of the examples. The next one is culture support, and basically what that is trying to support the culture of the schools. Last year there was a special grant that the state gave us that allowed schools to do things for bonding, and they're feeling like they really need that again this year, and so I just took the amount that we had budgeted from the grant last year and put that number in this list. We also had to make a change to the way our tutoring program runs, and so that is just a half-time staff person there. The district-wide certified sub for elementary, it was a temporary position we had last year, and I think the year before, where basically we hired a person to just be a sub, a certified sub, and they just filled in at the elementary or middle school or high school. We had a few of them, and the reason we did that is because we were having a substitute shortage. We hire all of our certified substitutes through the ESD, but they were having just a shortage of people, especially through COVID, because there was restrictions that people had to have in order to work in a school. And so that kind of reduced the people that were willing to work. So just having someone on staff to fill those subs was really very helpful for us, and the principals have requested that we continue that.
Anna, do we still have a shortage of subs through ESD?
It's hard to tell till the school year until the
Starts.
school year really starts.
Okay.
And what we did in the past, I believe we started in October hiring that certified sub. So they didn't actually work the full year. We could still do that, but we could still hire them in September. But it is really nice to kind of get a sense for how bad is the situation
Right.
before we, because it is more expensive to
Right.
hire an
That's what I
on-staff
was thinking.
certified sub.
Yeah, okay.
And then there's some other items on there that I didn't have dollar amounts for that we could play with. When I mentioned the security upgrades, I have no idea what that what that would look like or how much the board would want to set aside for that. And then increasing it pay for instructional assistants, we've seen that especially for special ed. We may need to do something there if we're going to be losing special ed IAs to general IAs or to title. We may need to increase what we pay special ed just to make those positions more desirable.
Yeah. Okay.
And again, I don't have numbers for these. It would be, something like if someone were to say, what if we increased it by X%, then I could do an analysis. Or what if we increased it by X dollars per hour, I could do an analysis and come up with a number. So basically I put all those in, and then it leaves the board with $160,000 to just kind of play with, or you can adjust these numbers. What would end up happening is once we talk through this and I get some feedback from the board, you wouldn't approve this list as it is. Really, it needs to look like a resolution that's a budget adjustment. So I would bring that to you with this just kind of as the support for that. And normally I don't know if there's anything normal about this. This is a lot of money, but what I was thinking I would do is bring this to you in September. But we'll be in Paulina in September, and anytime we do like a big budget type adjustment, I really want to we all want to really make sure that we give the public. It's just harder for them to make public comment out in Paulina, so we'll just do it in the month after that. So that gives us a couple of months to work through the details of this.
Okay, Anna, can any of these funds be utilized like for some of Leland's smaller maintenance issues or things he's been trying to get done but doesn't have enough in his funds? Can this be utilized anywhere kind of a deal, or what? Is there any restrictions, or?
There's no restrictions. It's going to be a budget adjustment, so it's really just the board making an increase to the budget, which you can make an increase up to a certain percentage without pulling the budget committee back together or doing any. It's just a resolution. So, but yes, that is on the third page here where I've tried to address that as well.
And Anna, just a point of clarification, this is an ongoing forward, not just a one-time piece.
That's a great point. Yeah, this particular page theoretically is ongoing because it's based on the state school fund, which usually increases. There was a time in the Great Recession when it decreased, and that was a pretty major thing that happened, but generally the state school fund stays the same or goes up. So you would then continue to just build these things into your budget going forward, unless for some reason we wanted to discontinue something. So I want to keep going through the list because if there's anything that you are concerned that we try to set aside money for, once you see all the lists, then you'll know if we need to add something. The next one is the Student Investment Account, or SIA. That's a grant that's paid by it's funded by the corporate activity tax, and it's somewhat restricted in what we can use the money for. So as I was looking at the list of things we wanted to try to address, I tried to put anything that could fit into this grant on this list. And that was a great place for us to put additional instructional assistance, because that is exactly what SIA is for, is the type of thing that instructional assistance would do.
Anna, sorry, are these the 5 that we currently have the open positions for, or are these 5 more on top of the ones that were opened after our workshop?
They're not on top of it. It's
Okay,
the same.
the same ones.
Yep, and we had listened to the board say we want to look at more instructional assistants, and so when we saw this money, we thought we don't really need to wait to post these positions because we know that they are going to want to do this. We don't necessarily have to fill them if you decide that's not the direction you want to go, but the earlier you post positions, the sooner you can get people hired. So
Right.
those are the 5.
Okay.
And then again, for SIA, part of that goes through to Pal Butte, so we need to account for that, which will be great for them.
Yeah.
And then this next one looks like kind of a weird number. It's basically I just plugged in the difference between the amount of money we're getting and subtracting those first 2 lines. This Senate Bill 819 is a huge concern. We've had hours and hours of training between different directors about how do we address this abbreviated school day change that's coming through in the law. It was effective July 1st. And so we've been doing a lot of learning about what that means, and there's a lot of unanswered questions. I really don't have any idea how to come up with a number on what this will do. But basically, there's a scenario where a student could be receiving a certain kind of service that's abbreviated, and then all of a sudden, within 5 school days, you have to change what you do for that student, and you may have to hire a one-on-one staff member for that student. So we don't know.
Do we have
what it's gonna
someone
look like.
looking at those numbers to know what we need to hire?
Yes, it's going to
Okay.
take some time, but it's also some unknowns, because right now, we don't even know what students for sure we have. We know the ones that rolled forward from last year, but we get a lot of new special ed students every year.
Right.
And a lot of them at the beginning of the school year and then all through the school year. So we're going to have to basically have a pot of money that's just going to be available for us to be able to respond quickly to whatever it is that we need. And the disciplinary consequences of not complying are pretty severe.
Right.
So we
So
just doing the
for
best we
the-
can for right now.
Right.
figure
So
it
for
out.
the numbers we currently have, are we aware of if we have enough provided support, or do we already need more?
We know we need more.
Okay.
Yes.
That's what I was wondering.
Sorry, that's a very simple.
Well, that's what I was going to ask, if they want you to hire somebody, but if there's nobody to hire, the fines are still there if there's no applicants?
That's our problem to deal with. The legislature didn't consider that in their writing of the law.
Is this, Joel, a top priority for the district? Getting
Yes,
on what numbers we need so we're not in non-compliance?
I would say the number of hours that our sped department, Jahan in particular, has kind of looked at analyzing this is darn near probably by about 100 by now. So like Ms. Logan discussed, we know how many are rolling forward in terms of they were on abbreviated day last year, and are they continuing that? But there is a lot of unknowns where the parent would have to sign off on abbreviated days. So this will be a huge lift from our sped department this year. I would say if you ask 100 districts in Oregon, 99 would say this is the top most difficult challenge heading into the school year.
So then the next page is even a bigger number. This is what I was talking about in the finance report on that line 17, the transfers out. This is that one-time money that it resulted, and I meant to tell you why that happened in 22-23. If you look at all the money coming in, all the revenue, every category is over budget. Our investment revenue was something like 600% over budget. Our state school fund revenue was way over budget, and that was because our enrollment went up when a lot of other school districts' enrollment went down. So it made a huge impact on us, even more than just our enrollment going up. And then on top of that, our expenses, the money going out, we had a lot of unfilled positions, not by choice, but just because we couldn't get people filled. The positive side effect of that is money that didn't get spent. So there was a lot that happened that is not normal. So these numbers that you're seeing are not normal. And so it's a good problem to have. I mean, you as a board, this is probably the fun part where you get to actually solve problems and do things that you were hoping to do because we've got the money to do it. So the list here, the first three things that I have listed, basically every year we set aside money for these positions. It started out that these positions were grant funded years ago, and rather than just waiting for the grant money to run out and say, oh no, I guess we have to eliminate these positions, every year we would look forward and say, let's try to set aside money for another year of these positions. And so this money that we would set aside would actually not be for this year, but for the year after. So it continues to fund these positions. I want to come back to summer school. Let's go ahead and keep moving forward. The maintenance fund, Jessica, that's exactly what you were talking about, trying to put some extra money into the maintenance reserve. And part of that is because if we were to budget, we don't budget to put any money into the maintenance reserve every year. This is really the way we handle it, is we kind of wait till the year ends, and then what extra money we have, we try to put some in the maintenance reserve. If we were to try to just budget it like that, it would look like we were budgeting to go into the negative or to not have enough money. So this has been working out really well. The safety items at Pal Butte, we had been looking, this isn't on top of what we've already told you. This is how we were planning to pay for those safety upgrades at Pal Butte.
Sorry, Anna, do we have safety upgrades at any other schools? I didn't see any other ones.
We can add that. That's something you guys can discuss.
Okay.
I put that on the first page, but we could also change some things around on the third page too.
I do think it's important to point out that the reason we're doing the safety upgrades at Pal Butte is because we did upgrades in 2013 with that bond in the in-town schools, but Pal Butte didn't get those upgrades. So we're catching up on the history of that.
And then the next item is the wrestling room, as you mentioned. We've heard from the MAT Club that if the school district can contribute $100,000, they think they can pull this off. And they actually think they can get it done before this wrestling season.
Would the room be utilized for anything aside from wrestling? Like, does it have basketball hoops?
I don't think it's been fully designed for that, but I believe, oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Leland.
So it'll be designed as a multi-purpose room. I mean, the main function is going to be wrestling, but we'll design it so that the mats can be rolled up and we could use the floor for something else if we need to.
So the room would have storage built in, so a different club or, somebody other than the 80 students could utilize that room?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, this next item is large. So during COVID, it was not just that COVID hit, which made us, required us to have a certain amount of square footage per student, but also at that same time, our middle school enrollment jumped up. So, and at that same time, we were receiving the new ESSER funds that we hadn't planned on. And so we used those ESSER funds to lease modular buildings for 3 years. And the ESSER funds the timeline for ESSER funds aligned perfectly with that lease. Next year is the 3rd year of that lease. So we have to figure out what we're going to do between now and then for those buildings. So at the end of that lease, we either send those modulars back, or we try to purchase them, or we try to purchase something else, or we figure out what to do for space at the middle school. So again, this is just Why are you smiling?
I'm going to ask Leland another question.
Okay, I will pause.
I'm assuming, Leland, you've already gone down this road as well at our options for what Anna was saying. Do we have options? Have you looked into this for the middle school? Sounds like we're still in need of them.
So I talked to the manufacturer about what we can do. We can release them and set the lease for whatever we want. We can buy them. And I talked to Adam, I think last week, about what their enrollment's looking like this year. And he told me that if we took those mods away, it would hurt their programs right now.
We have 6 classrooms out of those modules, is that
Yes.
right?
Yep.
Okay.
3 buildings.
Yeah, and there's 2 classrooms per building, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
So what's this 1.5 million then? Is that the purchase of them?
What's that again? I'm sorry.
The value there, what is that?
Yes.
I think Anna.
But I mean, is it to purchase them?
It could be either.
Is that-
It
Yeah.
could be we would just set the money aside, and then we can decide between now and then.
Buy another
do we
10-year lease
want
on them
to
or
continue-
purchase
Yeah,
them?
do we want to do another year of a lease?
That's just how much money you're allocating to the,
In
Problem.
trying to fit all these things in there, that's kind of what would work.
Has our, Adam or Marcus maybe, has our enrollment continue, or maybe you know, I don't know, has our enrollment at the middle school continued to go up in the need? I mean, are we busting at the seams with the 6 extra classrooms, or?
At this point, our enrollment is up probably about 40 kids from last year. And so numbers are going up. We did drop through COVID with online Grizzly Mountain School setups. So our numbers did drop and they're coming back. So we're up to about 675 recently. So those mods, those spaces, we have 3 of the 6. We have 3 core teachers that are teaching in there all day, and one is one of our CTE robotics. One is the CTE engineering, and then the other is our ISS classroom.
So are your modulars already set up for those classes? I would assume robotics has a different setup than a normal classroom. I'm not.
For the most part, yes.
Okay.
I mean, the robotics is the easy one. The engineering one is a little different because with Mr. Crouch, just recently got a grant that he kind of re-outfitted that classroom with new like construction maker spaces.
Okay.
so we were dealing with the same thing with that modular out of Powell Butte, that one that we were leasing, of going back to the bond piece, trying to get the timing piece of if you are going to be able to build a new facility, can you lease those to get you to that point of the building? Does that make sense?
I'm not really understanding what you mean.
For example, what we were doing out there, what we had talked about doing out in Powell Butte was because we had one modular that was having roof issues.
Mhm.
And again, just the lack of space, but trying to, because that lease on that modular was up this year, I think. But leasing it for another like 2 years, I think 2-year increments or something like that, just to see where that bond was, if the bond was going to pass, if it was going to land, of what to do with it at the end. Can we use that to get us to where, if you can get the bond passed, get the building put up to, or are they going to continue to stay there?
So it would, if we went with a design like we actually looked at for the last bond, then the mods would go away. And that would actually, the school would probably actually become a full circle, and you would have an interior courtyard. That was one design that we looked at. It would just depend on the design, but I would think, well, you know how I feel about mods. Ultimately, the better thing to do is to build something that's stick-built. I mean, even if it's modular like we did with Pioneer High School, it's still better than what those buildings would be.
Yeah.
I personally prefer to not have mods. It's better to just have stick-built, fully framed building.
Gotcha. So continue to lease them versus buy them, and
I would lease them instead of buy them, but
just to get you until the,
just to get us just to get
Each
us
buy.
until we can actually add on to the middle school.
Do we need to, I guess, anticipate more growth? Do we have like a chart for that, Anna? If we're gonna budget for something like this, like, do we need to anticipate a fourth modular in a sense? Or can you set aside funds for growth? I don't know how
Yeah.
you do that.
Basically, what we would do is just set the funds aside into the maintenance reserve,
Okay,
and then they would be there for the mods. And if for some reason we didn't need all of that for the mods, they would just be in the maintenance reserve to help with other maintenance reserve issues. Or you could, we could make other decisions, and any kind of a major project like that, we would bring to the board for approval before we did it, so.
okay.
We could probably do a projection, an enrollment projection from 4th and 5th grade too, to see kind of where we're going.
Yeah, in October, I think it is, I bring a enrollment projection to the board, and it's 3 different scenarios that
Okay.
it's usually somewhere in the middle where it ends up, but, yeah. But we don't have to do an enrollment projection in order to set those funds aside.
Okay. So just moving forward with this school year, are the 6 extra classrooms still adequate for the number we have enrolled? Yeah, okay.
All right, the next one on the list is the furniture replacement, just putting money into the furniture replacement fund. That is basic, it's like these chairs, it's student desks, student chairs, sometimes it's teacher desks, teacher chairs, sometimes it's conference room tables, things like that, just to keep us from getting into that situation that we were in several years ago when our furniture was just so run down that it was catching students' clothes and hair, and just you just have to replace things. It's the cost of doing business. The next one is very small, but the story behind putting money into an ASB fund is that we used to have a fee for, like, an activity fee that parents were charged. And our board over the years was always trying to find ways to eliminate fees for parents to pay. And so we decided to, going forward, at whatever point we made that decision, to eliminate those fees and to take money out of the general fund every year and just put it into those ASB funds. And so we've been doing that, but Pioneer never had one. And so Michelle Jonas has asked that we help them get set up with an ASB fund for Pioneer, and it's such a small amount of money that'll make a big difference for those kids. So that's why that's on the list.
Anna, has nobody previously asked for funds to Pioneer?
No. Michelle Jonas is really good at advocating for students. Not that, people before her weren't, but I think previously there was just a sense that it's not okay to ask, or there isn't money to be had, et cetera. So I think we'll see I've already seen her advocate for students for things like that. So, okay, the next one, we have a special fund that's called Funded Athletics, and every year we budget to take money and just put it into that fund, and then we try to pay for everything that we can pay for out of that fund, like coaching stipends, officials, transportation, things like that. This past year, that fund is going to end up in the negative, and it's because of all the charter transportation that we had to do. And we didn't want to do it's not our first choice to do charter transportation. We try our hardest to get bus drivers that are already on staff to do those bus trips. If we can't get anybody on staff, the next thing we do is we go to other school districts like Bend, Redmond, Madras, and ask them if they can do an athletic trip for us. If that doesn't work and we can't find any other options, then we charter the trip, because the only other option at that point is to tell the kids they can't go. And nobody wants to do that. And so, but those charter trips are very expensive, and we had a bus driver shortage all year. So we ended up with a lot of charter transportation costs. So this would just kind of cover that deficit.
So Anna, are we going to anticipate raising that for next year? To
We
not
did.
have a deficit? Okay.
Yeah, we did. And hopefully it covers it. The next one is a similar, it's linked kind of or related to the funded athletics, but it's just for athletic equipment and facilities. So it's for things like wrestling mats, volleyball stanchions, scoreboards, things that one group of students in one fiscal year really shouldn't be responsible for fundraising for the next 10 years of students to benefit from. It's something that the district tries to cover those things. Then the next thing on the list is just to purchase an additional bus, just to try to get us, ahead on buses as best we can. The textbook fund is fine right now. I look at probably 14 years out when I build a plan for textbook replacement. And every year we put $150,000 into the textbook reserve. Some years it's expensive, like when we do English language, that one's expensive. Some years are not as expensive, but if we just do it every year, $150,000, that covers us in today's dollars. It does not cover us for inflation. So that's why just, whenever we can put extra money from the general fund into that textbook reserve, we try to just fill in for a future inflation. And then the last one there is just the technology fund. And that's another one where we budget a little bit to go in there, but we always need more than what we can budget. So whenever we have the ability to put more in there, we do. One example is of why we try to put extra money in there is, I actually have two things to tell you about. One of them is that we want to do a major project for kind of a security upgrade, but we've applied for a federal grant to cover it, but there's a 25% matching. So this would help to cover that. The second thing is this year we had quite a large enrollment increase that we didn't expect at the high school, and we had to do an emergency purchase of Chromebooks so that we can make sure we've got enough Chromebooks for everybody when they get here. And so that would help to cover that. So, like I said, I try all through the year to capture all of the things that need to go on a list like this, but it's very possible that I've forgotten something or that there's something that I don't know about. So I just want input, and it doesn't have to be tonight. It can be tonight, but we have a couple months to work this all out.
I don't really have a specific, I guess, line item other than I don't see any allocations for our SPED department in a sense of, other than complying with the new bill. I don't know if they need, extra gadgets or gizmos or, something like that maybe. I don't know.
It's great that you're looking out for the SPED department. I do want to let you know they had kind of an unexpected grant recently that helped them buy a bunch of gadgets and gizmos,
Okay.
and they're still spending that, so
Okay.
that's been a huge blessing for them.
Okay.
The other thing is in the budget that was recently adopted for this year, there were extra SPED staff positions already added in.
Okay, great. Okay.
Will that be enough?
Sounds like not.
I don't know if there's ever enough of anything in a school district, but it's definitely going to help.
Hannah, could you talk a little bit about maintenance of effort and how that applies to expenditures in the SPED department and why they're special in that regard?
Yes, because we receive a federal grant called IDEA, there's a requirement that in the general fund, you cannot spend less on students with IEPs than you did the year before. And there's some, exceptions, and of course, you can look at it a couple different ways, but you have to maintain the level of spending for special education from year to year.
Okay.
Whenever that jumps up, then that's where your new bottom. Yep. And that's one of the reasons why when I was looking at adding staffing for complying with Senate Bill 819, I thought SIA would be a good place for that because that doesn't count towards maintenance of effort.
Okay, gotcha. Okay. And And I don't have 8.2 in my packet, so I'm not.
There's no handout for 8.2, it's just a presentation.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
So, Madam Chair, I wanted to make just a couple observations for the benefit of the board. You know, it's exciting to have this opportunity to spend extra money. You don't get that very often. It's kind of cool. But some things that the board should think about is that the 23-25 year was particularly rich for the legislature. They spent a ton of money last time because they had so much more than they expected. There is a forecast for the 25-27 biennium, which is much less exciting than the one we just had. And the problem is when revenue doesn't go up, your expenses still do, because your PERS costs don't go down and your insurance costs don't go down. So I would urge some caution about how fast we spend. By all means, let's spend, but let's hold back a little bit of it. Let's not spend all that we have, because we'll probably need it to balance out the fact that we'll have a more flat revenue forecast in future. The other thing I'm concerned about is something's unnatural in our enrollment in Crook County, yay us, but we don't beat the trend over time. Over time, if the state's enrollment is falling, our enrollment is falling. It's just a matter of where and when it shows up. And right now, we are outside the trend, so I suspect we may have some adjustments in years ahead on that, but we'll see in October. Anything you disagree with on that?
I agree with you, and that's exactly why on the general fund page, that first one there, when I estimated $1 million here, that's lower than my real estimate. Which means you could spend more if I had told you a higher number. But I also know you're probably as conservative as I am, and that's a really good point that goes right along with that. Okay. So 8.2 is a presentation. It has to do with the curriculum adoption, ELA, English Language Arts. That's spelling, reading, writing, everything related to English. In the work session, Ms. Edgerly had asked for information about the wit and wisdom costs, and she had been told some different numbers from different sources. So I just really wanted to address that. Try to make sure that we're giving information that can be understood. And if it came from anyone besides me, they don't have access to the numbers. So this is straight from the checks that went out the door. This is our grand total that we spent from our textbook adoption fund in 22-23 for English language arts adoption. It looks like a lot of money. It's $605,000. It is a lot of money. But we had been planning and saving for this for the 7 years leading up, just because we knew that this is the most expensive adoption. And when we did our previous ELA adoption, it was expensive as well. And we knew that there would be inflation and prices don't go down. It is the most expensive of all 7 subjects that we adopt. I think one number that was mentioned to you, Cheyenne, was 700,000 is one number that you mentioned. I don't know where that came from, but I imagine that it could have been when we started, that could have been our goal to stay under 700,000. And we did. I know that Stacy Smith did a lot of work with the textbook company to really try and bring those costs down and negotiate to bring them down as much as he could, and then also make sure that we didn't buy anything that we didn't think we would use.
Anna, is this for K through 12?
It is.
Okay.
Could you make sure that the mouse is right over the next slide button, and I will just click the mouse? Perfect. So that ELA adoption was district-wide. So you can see the amounts we spent for elementary, meaning K-5, middle school, which is 6 through 8, and high school, which is 9 through 12. So there's some components. I want to break down the elementary piece of this. There's a publisher called Wilson, which creates the Foundations, which is a K-3 literacy program. That's a bunch of workbooks and things like that. And then the second component of it comes from a company called Great Minds. And they created the Wit and Wisdom workbooks and then another product called Geodes. So those two things together come from Great Minds. And then the third component is the novels, books, like Three Little Pigs, Green Eggs and Ham, those kinds of things. So those are from just various publishers from various years. So from what I understand, people have had disagreements about the age appropriateness of some of the novels. And so we chose alternative novels. And that's important to know when you get to the next slide, because I'm going to show you kind of the breakdown of the costs. But we don't go directly to these publishers to purchase the books. They're in some other, Chicago or who knows where they are. I don't know. I didn't look that up because it wasn't important to me. But what we do instead is there's a big warehouse that we work with called Northwest Textbook Repository. I'm not sure what the third word is. We just call them Northwest Textbook. And what they do is they create bundles. And it makes it less expensive for us to go through them because it's in the Northwest. We have lower shipping, and because they're a warehouse and they basically pull together all this material and they put it into these bundles for us. So we bought, grade level bundles that had a price, but it included all these three things. So when I further break down how much each thing costs within that elementary adoption, we did buy some things that were specifically foundations that were extra, or just above what we had originally purchased, like perhaps we needed more for a certain grade level because of enrollment or whatever. And the same thing for geodes. But generally, what we purchased was a Foundations, Geodes, Wit and Wisdom, and novels set that was $380,000. And then, of course, we had some other things. There was some teacher training that we purchased. And then when I mentioned earlier that we replaced some of those novels, there was an extra $13,000 that we spent to do the novel replacements. And then there were some supplemental materials that were from other vendors that were like wall charts, and then we had to buy some Spanish versions of some things. So I don't know how much specifically of that was Wit and Wisdom because the publisher or the company that we bought it from didn't break it down like that. One thing to note is that in that total cost, we were provided with the workbooks for students through the year 2028. So there were 6 years of workbooks that were provided in that cost. We don't have them yet because we don't have room to store them, but every year all we have to do is just go order them, and that they're already paid for. So another question that Ms. Edgerly brought up was, where did the Wonders curriculum go? And it is gone. It was sent to the garbage, went to the trash. In the December, January timeframe, it was, we had adopted a new curriculum and people had these stacks of things. We're talking pallets of stuff when it comes to new curriculum. And so we needed to get it out of classrooms, we needed to get it out of closets, out of probably gyms, I don't know. And so our maintenance staff collected everything and they took it to the landfill in somewhere between December 15th and January 15th. I think they had to make a couple trips.
Anna, did we order any extra things for our 6 through 12 or only K through 5? Because the middle school and high school numbers are drastically lower and it doesn't look like we purchased any extra aids or
I regret
any
to
of
tell you
those.
I didn't delve very far into the middle school and high school at all, so I can get that information. Unless Carrie wants to be put on the spot, but you'd have to be on a mic. But
I wasn't here when we did this, but Study Sync was what we adopted at both the middle school and high school. That comes with a big textbook. It also comes with well, at the middle school at least, came with a few novels, class sets of novels for both 6th and 7th grade. And so that money accounts for some of those novel sets for those grade levels as well.
Yeah, and typically the older grades don't have, you know, you look at the elementary curriculum, it's like 3 different workbooks and fun and all these different things. You get to high school and you get a textbook and a novel, so it's generally less expensive.
Okay. So the middle school and high school are not, they're what? They're not Wit and Wisdom, they're a different program. Study Sync is I don't know if that's the publisher or the name of the curriculum. And it's the name of the curriculum, it's called Study Sync. But Anna, the Study Sync, the totals you have for middle school and high school and the 605,000 includes the Study Sync for the, okay,
Yes,
got it.
yeah.
The other thing I can say about, at least from the high school perspective, is some of those textbooks for like AP classes, so if you're talking about AP literature or AP writing, those are purchased separately, sometimes not in the adoption cycle, just depending on what college board approves for those textbooks. So sometimes, at least in my experience, that has come outside of textbook adoption. It still goes through an adoption process, but outside of the normal 7-year cycle. Also, a lot of times at the high school with the dual enrollment classes, those books are purchased through COCC for our students to use. And so it's not a cost that you would see that we have. So does the student purchase those books? No, anything, well, not anything, many things that we dual enroll with COCC, with a lot of our teachers, COCC purchases those books. Students can, in some cases, purchase those if they want to take them with them, but that usually doesn't happen. So our dual enrolled classes at the high school that aren't through COCC, say EOU, OIT, do they do the same program? No, typically they use the high school text or the high school teachers, and Joel, correct me if I'm wrong here, high school teachers put in a syllabi to Eastern Oregon or OIT and say, this is the textbook I'm using, this is the one we adopted through like science or math, and OIT or EOU will say, yep, that textbook is fine as long as you're covering these units and kids get tested on these things, and a lot of times they work with the college syllabus to do that, and so the textbook is still the main resource.
I had a question on the $13,000 that was spent on replacement text because I was told time and time again, over and over again, that there was nothing controversial in this curriculum and everything was fine. But the fact that the school spent $13,000 replacing textbooks or supplemental material, reading material, certain books, I guess, did you keep a list of what was replaced, why it was controversial? Was it sexual content? Critical race theory, for every single book that was removed and replaced, why was it removed?
Again, I wasn't there for that piece. I have the list of replacement texts, the texts that were pulled out of the different grade levels, mostly at 4th grade, but I'm sure it exists. Why? I don't have that.
Yeah, I got a list. Joel sent me a list, but it didn't specify to why the book was removed. And so I don't know if there's a way I can get that information.
I'm sure Joel and I can work on that together.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and look, but I'm not sure these are the texts that were replaced. How those texts were determined, we'd have to go back and dig around because neither Carrie and I were part of that decision.
And whose decision was it to replace the textbooks? Was it the teachers, or who looked over that to say, oh, this probably isn't appropriate? Because I'm assuming as a brand new curriculum, you're going to kind of find things as you go along.
I remember it was a presentation, it was a board meeting, we were in the Kirk County Commons, and Dr. Johnson presented on this, and we just would have to go back and dig up those notes.
Yeah, I was at the meeting. I just don't remember that she went over. I remember her saying like Little House on the Prairie and some different things. Like I don't remember I'd have to pull up the notes, but I'm more interested in the specifics of why the books were pulled, what kind of content they had.
I don't have that specifically word for word, so I can look at that, and we can find that and let you know.
My recollection is it wasn't a matter of delving into the specifics. The direction from the board was if it were controversial and it were causing problems in other places, we had a list of substitutes, so go with the one that wasn't causing problems. So, there was the one about seahorses and childcare, and people equated that with gender. So, fine, we're teaching about dolphins or something, I don't know. But it didn't get down to that level of content analysis.
Yeah, that's why I don't believe there's a list of this book was pulled here. I think it was what are the controversial books, and the board said pull them, and that was actually before they were even in any classroom, so.
Is that finished for you, Anna?
I'm finished, thanks.
Okay. So we'll move on to upcoming dates. Looks like first day for grades 1 through 6 and 9th grade is going to be Tuesday, September 5th. And our first day for grades 7 and 8 and 10 through 12 is Wednesday, September 6th. Our next school board meeting is Monday, September 11th. It's going to be at 4 p.m. It's in Paulina next month. And then we have our community listening session September 25th at the district office at 6:30 p.m. Does anybody have anything else to add? Comments, questions?
Can we ask Heather to send out a calendar invite on those community listening sessions?
On the thing that Joel sent last week, the weekly update, were those upcoming dates for the rest of the year for community listening sessions fine with everybody? I skipped March because that's spring break. And then for May, I did the day after Memorial Day rather than the Monday. So just look at those and make sure that you guys don't have any conflicts, and then I'll send out the calendar invites for the rest of the school year.
So we'll send those dates out to the board again this week, and you can double check and let us know if you have any issues.
Okay, anything else? Okay, this meeting's adjourned.